chosen one. Take a breath. You didn't just find this message. It found you, and not by chance, but by divine design. Right now, something bigger than you is moving in your life. The timing of this moment, the exact words you're about to hear, the pull you felt to press play. None of it is random. It's alignment. It's heaven whispering that you're not forgotten, you're not overlooked, and you are most certainly not alone. Have you been feeling like something is shifting beneath the surface? Like you've been walking through a season of silence, but deep down, you knew a divine message was coming. That strange stillness you felt lately, it wasn't stagnation, it was preparation. Because today, God is confirming what your spirit already sensed. Someone with power and position has been assigned to your breakthrough. Let that sink in. You don't need to hustle for attention. You don't need to strive for approval. You don't need to knock on every door hoping someone will finally see your worth. God already did, and what He ordains, no one can deny. Behind the curtain of the unseen, He has appointed a person, someone with influence, authority, and favor, whose divine assignment is you. Yes, you. The one who stayed faithful when no one was clapping. The one who kept showing up in the dark, believing something glorious was on the horizon. If this resonates with your spirit, don't scroll past it. This is more than a video, it's a sacred signal. Type 777 in the comments as your way of saying, I'm ready, I'm aligned, I receive it. That number is not just a sequence, it's a spiritual code that declares your readiness to step into the breakthrough God already put in motion for you. And to every chosen soul who has supported this message through super thanks, thank you from the depths of our hearts. Your love is seen, your seed is blessed, and heaven is taking note of every act of faith. Your generosity helps deliver divine messages like this to others who are waiting for the very confirmation you once longed to hear. You are part of this spiritual chain reaction. What's coming next will stir your spirit. This is not a regular message. It's not entertainment. This is an activation. Every time you revisit this word, a new revelation will rise. This message will meet you where you are, but it won't leave you there. It will pull you up. It will call you out. It will usher you into your next level with boldness and clarity. You are about to uncover not just the reason behind your recent struggles, but the strategy God has designed to transform them into your greatest testimonies. So stay with me. Don't just watch, immerse yourself. What if this is the exact message your future self will thank you for not ignoring? What if the next few minutes unlock the very door you've been praying would open? Let's walk through that door together, because someone with power has already been positioned for your rise, and your spirit knows this is just the beginning. God's chosen ones, someone with power and position, has been assigned to your breakthrough. You, the one chosen by God, have waited longer than most, and not just in time, but in depth, in silence, in isolation. While others seemed to glide effortlessly through open doors, you stood still before doors that would not budge, no matter how hard you knocked or how faithfully you prayed. You watched people rise to places you dreamed of, people with half your passion, half your vision, and sometimes not even a sliver of your integrity. And in those quiet moments, a storm of questions began to rise in your soul. You wondered, what's wrong with me? Why hasn't it happened yet? But hear this deeply and let it settle in your spirit. This delay is not a punishment, it is a process. You were never overlooked. You were being overhauled. God has not denied you. He has been developing you. As it is written, humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time He may exalt you. 1 Peter 5:6. This is not just theory, it's the rhythm of heaven. While you were marking the days, wondering if heaven had gone silent, God was marking your roots, watching them grow deeper beneath the surface. While others raced ahead in sprints of shallow success, you were being trained for something that doesn't just flash. It endures, something eternal. God has been refining you for a glory too heavy for hurried hands to carry. Do you remember how David was anointed in secret among his brothers, then sent back to tend sheep? He was not immediately placed on the throne. Instead, he was placed in obscurity, because before he could rule a kingdom, he had to master solitude, lions, and the art of worship in the wilderness. Like David, you were anointed quietly, not for a spotlight, but for a soul transformation. That difference matters. It defines the chosen. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. 1 Samuel 16:7. While others chase applause, you've been taught to chase God's whisper. While others move with the trends, you've been taught to wait on the wind of the Spirit. Could it be that what felt like stagnation was actually divine acceleration, but underground? You see, God isn't just answering your prayers by shifting your environment. He's answering them by shifting you. He's been extending your patience because the next level of your life will require supernatural endurance. He's been teaching you to hear His voice in the stillness because your next season will be filled with noise, opinions, and distractions, and only His voice will keep you grounded. He's been sharpening your discernment, so when opportunity knocks, you won't just say yes, you'll say yes to the right door. But let patience have her perfect work, that ye may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. James 1:4. The waiting season, though excruciating at times, has taught you to survive purely by faith. It has stripped away pride, peeled off your masks, and forced you to encourage yourself when no one else was watching. And in that dark room, away from accolades and validation, God was building a warrior who had no idea just how powerful they were becoming. When Pope Francis was still Jorge Mario Bergoglio, a relatively unknown cardinal, he often reminded his students, God always chooses the humble to confound the proud. That humility, birthed through delay and refined through obedience, becomes the foundation of true spiritual authority. Think about that. Hasn't your delay made you more humble, more hungry, more ready? And let's consider artist Frida Kahlo. Despite her physical suffering and years of confinement, she created her most impactful work while bedridden. Her pain birthed perspective. Her waiting season birthed a legacy. Could it be that your waiting season has also been preparing you not just to receive, but to carry something the world has never seen before? God is not behind schedule. Heaven doesn't run late. What you've called a delay, God calls a design. And someone with power and position is already being assigned to your breakthrough. But they won't be arriving because you begged for a connection. They're coming because your character has reached the spiritual maturity to receive the weight of divine favor without collapsing under it. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not tarry. Habakkuk 2:3. You haven't just been waiting, you've been becoming. And that, chosen one, is what makes your story different. The reward for your patience will not simply be a blessing, it will be transformation, a kind that no quick success could ever offer. This is the turning point that many never recognize until it's already unfolding. Yet you, God's chosen one, are discerning it now. While you were walking through seasons where you felt completely overlooked, heaven was not silent. God was not absent. Behind the curtain of your daily struggles, He was orchestrating a divine arrangement that no eye could see and no ear could hear. Just like a master builder aligning the stones of a temple, He has been putting the right pieces together, quietly, precisely, supernaturally. And one of those pieces is a person, someone who holds keys that you didn't even know existed, someone with access to places you've only seen in your dreams, someone who doesn't just have a title, but carries weight, influence, and reach. This person is being stirred in their spirit, and they may not even know your name yet, but your spirit has already echoed into theirs. Heaven has whispered your identity into the assignment of their life. Just like how Pharaoh was troubled by dreams that Joseph alone could interpret, this person has begun to feel a pull they can't ignore, a divine prompting that someone, somewhere, needs their help. And that someone is you. What if the reason they can't sleep peacefully is because your breakthrough is stirring inside them? What if the doors you've been praying for are now on their mind, even before they meet you? God is awakening them because of your faithfulness, not because you begged for it, not because you forced it, but because you've remained obedient in the silence. You didn't chase influence, you chased intimacy with God. And now God is sending someone with influence to find you. But understand this deeply. They could not be released into your story until you were truly ready. If they had come too early, you may have mistaken them for your savior, placing your hope in the vessel instead of the source. But now you know better. Now you recognize that people are merely instruments, beautiful, powerful, helpful, but never the origin of your provision. God has always been your source. That's why you no longer wait in despair, but in divine expectation. There is no more desperation in your prayers, only quiet confidence, because you've learned that the long nights were never wasted. Your tears were watering the soil of your growth. Your isolation was preparing your heart for elevation. Your silence wasn't empty. It was sacred training, tuning your ears to recognize divine strategy instead of human noise. And now the moment is near. This isn't a time to rush. It's a time to breathe deeply and become fully aware. Feel the weight of your journey, not to carry it again, but to honor it. God is about to answer you in a way that surpasses all logic. Just as Mordecai was honored by King Xerxes in front of his enemies, so too will your obedience be honored in plain sight. But can you sense it? That the shift isn't just circumstantial, it's spiritual. Everything you've endured was preparing you for this alignment. Take a moment to imagine, what if the very stage that person stands on, the resources they hold, and the people they know are all being made ready to amplify your voice, your mission, your purpose? This is not just a breakthrough. It is the divine unveiling of everything God spoke to you in the darkness, now brought into the light. There is a quote by Lisa Nichols, a transformational speaker and entrepreneur who once battled deep poverty before rising to become a multimillionaire and global inspiration. She said, "Your conviction and your convenience don't live on the same block. And you, because you chose conviction, you are now stepping into the realm of favor. God saw your sacrifice, and He has prepared someone with both power and position to carry the next chapter of your destiny forward. You were never forgotten. You were being refined. And now, the divine connection that heaven has orchestrated is about to appear, not because of who you are in the world's eyes, but because of who you are in the eyes of God. You've been chosen, but chosen ones often walk through life feeling unseen. You've shown up every single day with consistency, giving your best, pouring your heart into every task, no matter how small. And yet, deep down there's been an ache, a quiet whisper in your spirit asking, does anyone even notice? You've endured the silence after the sacrifice. You've sown seeds in secret, wept quietly through endless nights, and offered prayers that no one heard but heaven. Behind closed doors, your spirit groaned for clarity, for breakthrough, for acknowledgement. Still, you remained faithful. You carried on with grace even when applause never came, even when it seemed like the spotlight always landed on others while you stayed in the shadows. But here's the truth your soul needs to receive right now. You are not invisible. You are being watched, and not just by anyone. Someone with influence, someone with authority, someone positioned strategically for divine purpose has taken notice of you. They've been observing your integrity, your strength under pressure, your quiet courage. What if the very thing that has made you feel overlooked is the same thing that is drawing the right eyes to you? They may not have liked your posts, they may not comment, they haven't reached out yet, but they've been paying close attention. They saw you hold your peace when others lost theirs. They saw you carry burdens with dignity. They watched how you didn't let bitterness take root, even when betrayal would have justified it. And quietly, something in them began to stir. This is not about passive spectatorship. Their soul recognized something sacred in you, just like the prophet Samuel once passed by all of Jesse's sons before asking, "Is there anyone else?" They are sensing that the one they've been looking for isn't the most obvious. You, like David, have been faithfully tending your field. You didn't chase the platform, and you didn't demand recognition. You simply obeyed. And just as God sent Samuel to anoint David, still smelling like sheep from the pasture, He is stirring someone to seek you out. David's brothers were strong, presentable, and eager. They postured themselves for promotion, but God's eye was not on appearance, it was on authenticity. David wasn't seeking a crown, he was simply fulfilling his assignment. Isn't that what you've been doing too? Showing up, staying true, choosing obedience over visibility. And now, something is shifting in the spirit. There's a story about Maya Angelou, a revered poet and civil rights activist who once said, "I come as one, but I stand as 10,000. She understood what it meant to be watched, not just by eyes, but by legacy. Her strength, like yours, wasn't forged in front of cameras. It was shaped in the hidden places. And when the world finally saw her, they didn't just see a person, they saw purpose. In the same way, someone has been watching you, not to be entertained, but to be awakened. Your authenticity in a world full of masks is speaking volumes. Your resilience in silence is echoing in rooms your feet haven't even entered yet. Have you felt it lately? That sense that something is happening, even if you can't yet name it? That someone is on the other side of your faithfulness, sensing that their next assignment might be connected to your name. What if the reason God kept you hidden was to protect your preparation? What if the time in obscurity wasn't punishment but positioning? Because now heaven is aligning visibility with your readiness. You don't have to step out of character to be seen. The right eyes already see you. The person who matters is already paying attention, and when the time comes, they will move. Not because you tried to prove your worth, but because God whispered your name into their spirit. Stay faithful in your field. Keep doing what you've been called to do, because when divine timing meets divine positioning, even the forgotten shepherd becomes the anointed king. While others are striving to impress, competing for attention and validation, you have quietly been becoming. You've evolved in silence. You've refined your character behind closed doors. You didn't seek to be seen. You sought to be shaped. And it is because of that depth, because of that unseen faithfulness, that someone with influence has begun to feel a divine pull toward you. It's subtle at first, a name heard in passing, a piece of your work that lands in their hands unexpectedly, a lingering sense that they've been called to something or someone. This isn't coincidence. It's not luck. It's the orchestration of God. The one who sees in secret is now revealing you in the spirit before you are revealed in the flesh. You didn't clamor for the spotlight. You remained steadfast when no one clapped, and because of that, heaven has placed you into the vision of someone with the ability to open doors that have remained shut for years. Could it be that while you were praying for breakthrough, someone else was being positioned to carry the key? There's a divine reason that your name keeps echoing in their spirit. They may not even realize it yet, but they're being drawn into your orbit. And unlike fleeting attention, this is sacred. It is the beginning of a mission, a heavenly assignment they didn't ask for, but were chosen to fulfill. Just as Ruth continued working faithfully in the fields, unaware that Boaz, the one who would redeem and elevate her, was watching from a distance, you too have been observed in your faithfulness. Boaz didn't stumble upon Ruth by chance. He noticed her consistency, her loyalty, her humility, and when the time was right, he moved toward her with purpose. What if your Boaz moment is nearing? What if the one watching from the shadows is being stirred to step into the light of your story? In a similar way, Steve Jobs, co-founder of Apple, once said, "You can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking backward." He too was once overlooked and even ousted from the very company he created. But during that hidden season, he evolved, matured, and prepared for a comeback that would shift the course of history. Like you, he wasn't finished, he was simply being refined. This person who has you in their sight may not yet know why, but when the moment comes and they finally speak, it won't be a casual encounter. It will be a divine unlocking, a holy confirmation that everything you endured in the silence had a purpose. Every hidden chapter, every quiet sacrifice, every moment you chose obedience over recognition, it was all leading here. Can you feel that something is shifting? That the silence you've endured is not empty, but expectant? If they had found you too early, you might still have been healing, still searching for affirmation in the wrong places. But now you know who you are. You've been rooted in your identity. You're no longer desperate for attention. You are grounded in truth, and that's why you're ready. You're no longer trying to prove your worth. You're simply walking in it. Don't let the silence deceive you. Just because the crowd isn't cheering doesn't mean your work is going unnoticed. The ones who clap in public aren't always the ones God uses to shift destinies. The ones who truly matter are those who move mountains in secret, and those are the ones God assigns to the chosen. So keep showing up, keep building in quiet places, keep honoring your assignment when no one is watching, because someone is watching. And when the right moment arrives, they won't just stumble upon you. They will recognize you. And what once seemed like chance will reveal itself as the divine alignment it was all along. You've been chosen, and yet at times you've looked at yourself and wondered, why me? You've seen the polished resumes, the glamorous profiles, the elite networks, and felt as if you didn't belong. You've noticed others climbing ladders built by human approval, while you stand with trembling hands holding only your faith. There are moments when you've questioned your qualifications, when the enemy has whispered, you don't have what it takes. But hear this clearly in your spirit. God never needed your degree to authorize your destiny. He is not waiting for you to meet human standards before he moves. Heaven doesn't review resumes, it releases mantles. While the world demands credentials, God looks for character. While society seeks prestige, God searches for purity of heart. He doesn't need your perfection. He desires your yes. This divine mission placed on your life, this pull you felt in your spirit that won't go away, it was never meant to be validated by the world's systems. It was birthed in the spirit, not in a boardroom. God doesn't need the approval of men to anoint a vessel. When he chose David, he was the forgotten son, the one left in the field. No crown, no training, no title, but he had a heart after God's own, and that was enough. Can you feel it too? That what you carry is not a product of education, but of encounter. That the authority in your voice didn't come from a classroom, but from your battles, your scars, your obedience in silence. When God calls someone, he doesn't request letters of recommendation. He places a mantle. He sends his spirit. He assigns heavenly backing. And what makes you chosen is not your resume or your reputation. It's the anointing God has placed on your life. The oil is what separates you. The oil is what breaks yokes. And the oil is what is attracting the right people, the right opportunities, and the right timing. That is why the person who is being divinely assigned to your life won't be impressed by superficial things. They're not coming to you because you're polished. They're coming because you carry purpose. They're being drawn, not to your image, but to your substance. And they're not looking for someone who has all the answers. They're looking for someone who walks in truth, the kind of truth that can't be faked, the kind that radiates through wounds that have been healed in secret. Think of Mother Teresa. Before she became a global symbol of compassion, she was simply a nun walking through the streets of Calcutta, unnoticed by the world. She had no massive platform, no headline-making degrees. But her authenticity pierced through apathy. Her mission didn't begin with permission from society. It began with compassion from heaven. She proved that divine assignment doesn't bow to status. It moves through surrender. Just like that, the one watching your life, quietly, spiritually, intentionally, is not judging by what others can see. They are being drawn by something deeper. It's not your charm that moves them. It's your calling. Not your wealth, but your wisdom. They may not yet know why they feel pulled toward you, but their spirit has already recognized your authenticity. Can you feel how sacred that is? You might not realize it, but your scars speak. Your journey holds power. The very things you thought disqualified you have become the evidence of your preparation. Your story, with all its brokenness and beauty, is exactly what sets you apart. Because in a world of people pretending to have it all together, you've dared to be real, even when it cost you relationships, opportunities, and approval. And that is what heaven honors. That is what God breathes upon. That is what marks you as one of the chosen. The world may seek those who perform, but God selects those who persevere. And you, chosen one, have been persevering in truth. You don't need to chase validation. You've already been marked. You don't need credentials to be effective. You've already been called. And those who are meant to see you will see you, not for what the world says you lack, but for what God says you carry. This person has been divinely assigned to your path. They've seen enough counterfeit light to recognize the real thing. After years of interacting with platforms built on personality rather than purpose, something in their soul is stirring. They're not looking for noise anymore. They're seeking substance. They've become disillusioned with carefully constructed appearances that have no spiritual depth. And now their spirit is being drawn almost magnetically toward yours. They may not yet understand why your name lingers in their mind, why your presence holds their attention, or why your voice carries such weight. But something deep within them is whispering, "This is the one I've been sent to help." Could it be that their assignment from God includes your elevation, and when they find you, whether through a conversation, a post, a whisper of your name in passing, it will not be a coincidence. It will be divine alignment. Scripture reminds us in Proverbs 16:9, "In their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps." This meeting will not be man-made. It will be heaven-led. You won't need to perform, prove, or plead. The time for auditions is over. The days of trying to squeeze yourself into spaces that were never made for your anointing have ended. What would happen if you finally stopped campaigning for access and simply allowed yourself to be discovered in God's timing? This connection is not an interview. It is a divine confirmation. They won't come to measure your credentials. They will come because the anointing on your life is undeniable. Isaiah 61:1 declares, "The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor." What if the oil on your life is what heaven intends to use as a sign to those assigned to bless you? So don't diminish your fire to fit a system God never asked you to belong to. Don't apologize for the empty spaces on your resume. What if what you lack in accolades is exactly what allows your purity and authenticity to shine through. You've been through fire, not for fame, but for formation. And the person God is sending has been praying for someone like you, someone real, someone refined. But are you ready to be seen not for your polish, but for your purpose? Are you prepared to be chosen not because of your image, but because of your spiritual identity? When Jesus called his disciples, he didn't select religious scholars or political leaders. He chose fishermen, tax collectors, and the overlooked. Why? Because he wasn't searching for perfection, he was searching for availability. He told his followers in John 15:16, "You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit, fruit that will last." What if the fruit you've been bearing in silence is now ripe for recognition? Your scars, your story, your survival, they are your strength. You've chosen authenticity even when it cost you, and that decision has marked you. In a world where many wear masks, your truth sets you apart. Could it be that what the world dismissed is what heaven is now highlighting? Think of Florence Nightingale, the founder of modern nursing. Before she was honored, she was criticized. Before she was praised, she was rejected. Yet she followed a divine inner call, not the applause of society. Her mission wasn't qualified by position, it was clarified by obedience. Just like you, she didn't wait for permission to walk in her purpose. So remain steadfast, hold fast to your truth. Continue walking in quiet power, because when this helper arrives, this strategic, heaven-sent individual, it will not be your accomplishments that draw them in. It will be your oil, it will be your obedience, it will be your truth. Keep your lamp burning. Matthew 25:13 warns us, "Therefore keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour. Be ready." When purpose and preparation collide, no degree, no system, no man-made barrier can block the elevation that follows. And so, I ask you, are you willing to be chosen, even if it means being hidden until the appointed time? Will you trust that heaven is working, even when earth is silent? Because when the doors open, it will not be random. It will be the unfolding of a divine appointment written long ago. You've been chosen, and this is a truth your spirit must grasp with all its strength. When help comes, it won't arrive gradually. It won't come with a countdown. It won't knock softly at the door. It will descend suddenly, swiftly, like lightning from heaven, shaking the ordinary into the extraordinary. One moment, your life will feel routine, almost mundane. You'll rise expecting a normal day, possibly even feeling weary or uncertain. You'll go about your assignment, not sensing anything remarkable, until suddenly everything shifts. In a flash, grace will interrupt your atmosphere. A phone call, a divine encounter, a message you never saw coming. The words you've longed to hear will find you. A conversation in a room you didn't even know existed will carry your name. And just like that, years of silent obedience will meet one moment of supernatural unlocking. Have you ever wondered what it might feel like when everything changes? Not because you chased it, but because heaven declared it was time. That's the nature of divine intervention. It doesn't wear a flashing sign. It doesn't shout through megaphones. Instead, it arrives wrapped in what seems ordinary, but carries the fingerprints of God. Someone who has been quietly assigned to your breakthrough may appear to show up out of nowhere. But the truth is, they've been moving in your direction for some time. You just couldn't see it yet. Isaiah 48:3 reminds us, "I foretold the former things long ago, my mouth announced them, and I made them known. Then suddenly I acted, and they came to pass." Do you feel the weight of that? Suddenly, God acts. That's His signature. His movements are swift. His timing is perfect. He doesn't need your effort to align a miracle. He only needs your readiness. Joseph's story is proof. One morning, he was a forgotten prisoner. By nightfall, he stood in Pharaoh's palace, wearing royal garments and holding unprecedented authority. There was no lead-up, no months of gradual promotion. Just one conversation that pulled him from the dungeon to destiny. One sentence changed his season. Could the same be true for you? That's how God operates with his chosen ones. While you've been serving in silence, heaven has been scheduling your unveiling. Behind the scenes, someone has been preparing a table where your name has a reserved seat. And when the moment comes, it will not require your push. It will require your posture. Because God doesn't need you to perform when his appointed time arrives. He needs you to perceive. Psalm 31:15 declares, "My times are in your hands." This verse isn't just poetic, it's prophetic. Your timeline isn't in the hands of fate or chance or even your own striving. It's in the hands of the one who already wrote the ending. And that means when the right moment comes, you won't miss it. It will come suddenly, and it will come with clarity. Think of Tyler Perry, now one of the most successful filmmakers and entrepreneurs in the world. For years, his work went unnoticed. He lived out of his car. He staged plays no one came to see, but he remained faithful. Then, suddenly one night, one show, one opportunity changed his entire life. He once said, "What I've learned is, you don't wait for the right moment. You remain faithful until it arrives." Are you willing to remain faithful in the quiet moments, knowing that God's breakthrough often comes like a whisper after a long silence? The person assigned to help you may not give you a warning. They may not send an announcement. They will simply appear, and what seems like coincidence will reveal itself as divine strategy. You won't need to chase the door. The door will open by command. So stay ready. Keep your lamp filled with oil. Remain steadfast. Don't let weariness blind you to the moment God has appointed, because when heaven moves, it moves quickly. And when it does, when the phone rings, when the message comes, when the conversation opens a path you didn't knock on, don't hesitate. You've been prepared for this. You've endured for this. You've grown for this. You've passed the test in secret. Now, heaven is preparing to reward you openly. Do you feel it? That stirring in your spirit that something is about to break forth. It's not your imagination. It's alignment. You don't need to know the details to trust the divine orchestration. You only need to know that God is a God of suddenlies. And yours is coming. You've just walked through a season that felt quiet, maybe even stagnant. Days passed where nothing seemed to move. No doors opened and no signs appeared. It would have been easy to believe that heaven had paused, that your prayers were floating unanswered. But don't be fooled by silence. In the unseen realm, everything is aligning. Chains are quietly breaking. Conversations are unfolding about you in hidden places. Angels are already dispatched. Help isn't coming, it's already on the way. The delay wasn't denial, it was divine timing. And when heaven's timing collides with your obedience, miracles break forth without warning. Like a seed growing beneath the soil, unseen but never still, your promise has been germinating underground. What if the stillness was never inactivity, but sacred preparation? But here's the part you must embrace. You still have a role to play. Your job isn't to make it happen, it's to remain faithful. Stay on the wall. Keep doing what God last told you to do, even when it seems repetitive or insignificant. Keep showing up. Keep serving. Keep praying. Keep trusting. Because what if the very thing that looks like routine obedience today is what's keeping you in position for tomorrow's breakthrough? Galatians 6:9 encourages us, "Let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." The proper time is not announced with fanfare. It often sneaks in when we least expect it, dressed like an ordinary day. And sometimes help doesn't look like help until it reveals its purpose. Maybe that text you're about to receive, that person you're about to meet, or that door that's about to swing open will be the very thing heaven assigned to shift your season. Are you ready for help to come in a form you didn't expect? You're not simply holding space, you're being made ready, so that when the moment arrives, you don't fumble the blessing. Don't let the silence deceive you. Don't interpret the lack of visible movement as the absence of divine activity. Heaven doesn't always give updates. It moves when the command is released. And those who remain faithful in the wait are always the ones positioned to receive. Just as Esther remained hidden in the palace until it was time to speak, you too have been prepared for such a time as this. What if your moment is closer than it looks? What if the very silence you've endured is proof that heaven is working beneath the surface? You are not waiting for help. Help is waiting for the green light from heaven. And when that light turns, it will come swiftly, undeniably, and precisely tailored to your assignment. No delay, no mistake. Psalm 46:5 says, God is within her. She will not fall. God will help her at break of day. Help is not late. It's timed perfectly. So keep your spirit in expectation. Guard your peace like a sacred treasure. Let your heart remain in alignment, because suddenly, yes, suddenly, what looked delayed will shift in an instant. He's not just about to bless you, he's about to shock you. There is a truth you must grasp as one of God's chosen ones. The person God is sending into your life has not been placed there to dominate, manipulate, or reshape you into someone you're not. They were not assigned to silence your voice or to rewrite your identity to match their expectations. Instead, they have been anointed and positioned to serve your divine purpose, not their ego. Their elevation is not about overshadowing you. It's about activating what's inside of you. This person has walked into boardrooms you've only dreamed about. They've sat in places where laws are crafted, where economies are shifted, and where the destinies of nations and individuals are decided. God has allowed them to enter these sacred spaces, not merely for their own promotion, but so they can reach back and become a divine bridge for you. Have you ever wondered why you keep praying for access, and suddenly someone with the keys appears in your life? That is not coincidence. It is orchestration. Just like Joseph in Genesis 41, who was elevated to power in Egypt, not for his own sake, but so he could provide for his family in a time of famine, this person has been lifted up to become part of your provision. Joseph told his brothers, God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. Genesis 45:7. Could it be that someone else's breakthrough was never really about them, but about how God planned to use them for you? You may not have their title, you may not be in the same circles, but you have the anointing, and that is why their spirit feels drawn to you. They don't even understand why they feel compelled to help, why they're opening doors, why they're advocating for someone who isn't even in the room. But it's because God has stirred something in them on your behalf. They have been assigned by heaven to support your destiny, even when there's nothing in it for them. Consider the story of Esther. Though she was queen, her position wasn't just for her comfort. Mordecai reminded her with urgency, "Who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" Esther 4:14. In the same way, someone in power has been placed in their position for such a time as this, for your time, for your mission. Could it be that they're starting to realize their promotion was never about them climbing higher, but about helping you rise? In today's world, people like Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, often speak about using influence to serve a greater good. In one interview, he said, "You want to be the pebble in the pond that creates the ripple for change." Think about that for a moment. What if someone's entire journey to influence was so that your ripple, your breakthrough, could finally begin? This isn't about pity, charity, or recognition. They don't see you as a project or a cause. To them, you're a sacred assignment. They serve with joy, not because they seek applause, but because they feel the burning of divine urgency within their soul. You are not some obligation. They feel honored to support you, even if they don't fully understand why. Their influence will become the platform from which you launch. Their resources will be tools placed into your hands by divine design, and their networks, once unreachable, will transform into bridges ordained by God to carry you into the spaces where your name, your voice, and your calling were always meant to flourish. How many times have you felt unseen, like no one heard your cry, like your prayers were bouncing off the ceiling? Yet now, someone's voice will echo in rooms where you've never stepped, and it will carry the weight of divine favor. You may not know them personally yet, but heaven has already introduced you in spirit. You are not forgotten. You are not a second thought. You are the reason someone is being stirred awake in the middle of the night, compelled to act on your behalf. This is not about influence for influence's sake. This is about purpose, meeting preparation, and your time has come. Let this be the moment where you recognize that God's strategy includes relationships. His breakthroughs often wear the disguise of people. And this time, the person he has chosen to carry your name into destiny isn't here to take from you. They're here to lift you into everything you were born to become. God is never random. He is intentional in everything he does. When he brings someone with power and influence into your life, it's not to overshadow you or make you feel smaller. It's to amplify your purpose, to raise your voice, and to increase the reach of the assignment he's already placed inside of you. Their strength wasn't given to outshine yours, but to spotlight it. Their platform wasn't built to block your way, but to open new doors you couldn't access alone. You are walking into a season where someone's influence is about to become an instrument in God's hand, not to limit you, but to unlock you. Their power has not been sent to oppress or silence. It has been divinely redirected to uplift and position. Have you ever considered that what seemed like their success was actually a preparation for your elevation? These people, these destiny helpers, understand something that many don't. True authority is not measured by titles or control, but by the ability and willingness to serve. Jesus made this clear in Matthew 20:26, when he said, "Whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant." And when someone walks in that truth, it's unmistakable. You'll recognize them not by how loudly they speak, but by how humbly they act on your behalf. They will defend your name in rooms where you've never set foot. They will speak favor over your life when you are absent. When others question your worth, they will affirm your value. And they won't do this out of obligation or pity, but because your future has been supernaturally tied to their assignment. There's something in their spirit that knows backing you is part of their destiny. This is not a relationship built on desperation or survival. It's a holy alignment, divinely orchestrated for impact. You carry the oil, the anointing that breaks yokes and stirs hearts. They carry elevation, the reach, and the resources. You bring the message, the truth that transforms lives. They bring the microphone, the tool that magnifies your voice. You hold authenticity, the evidence of God's hand on your life. They offer the platform, the space where heaven wants to showcase what you carry. When these forces unite, it's more than a connection, it's a spiritual movement that shifts atmospheres. Could this be the beginning of something bigger than you imagined? What if your next chapter isn't just about your growth, but about how your calling is meant to ripple into nations because someone else said yes to serving your vision? Don't shrink back when they show up. Don't second-guess your worth. You were never meant to grovel for help or prove yourself to be deserving. You only need to stand firm in your calling, marked, anointed, and already approved by heaven. When God sends someone, He doesn't ask you to audition. He asks you to believe. And let this settle deep in your soul. God did not send them because you are weak. He sent them because you are ready. Their strength isn't a threat to your purpose. It is the vehicle through which your purpose will reach places it never could before. Just like Aaron supported Moses' arms when he grew weary during battle, Exodus 17:12, someone is coming to hold up your arms, not because you're failing, but because the mission must go on. One real-life example of this kind of divine partnership can be seen in the story of Pope John Paul II and Mother Teresa. Though they came from different paths, one a global religious leader, the other a humble servant of the poor, their missions aligned in an extraordinary way. He gave her voice credibility on the world stage. She gave his office authenticity by embodying the gospel through love. Together, they amplified the message of Christ in ways neither could have done alone. That is what God is setting up in your life. The people he is sending now may not wear collars or robes. They might be entrepreneurs, artists, policymakers, or spiritual mentors, but they come with divine clarity. They know their strength isn't for domination, it's for distribution. Their wealth isn't for status, it's for stewardship. And their voice isn't for applause, it's for advocacy. You are not in their shadow, you are in God's spotlight. And through this divine alliance, your calling will not only stand, it will soar. You are God's chosen one. And because you are chosen, you must hear this truth deeply. Favor can bring you to the doorway, but it will never drag you through it. That is your part. God can orchestrate divine alignments, place helpers in your path, and perfectly time every conversation, meeting, and opportunity. He can send you the platform and even whisper your name into the ears of powerful people. But there will always come a moment when heaven waits for you to walk forward in obedience. This moment of crossing is sacred. It is the divine test between preparation and activation. Even when your destiny is ordained, you must still choose to participate. Like the Israelites standing before the Promised Land, you can see it, hear about it, even taste its fruit, but you still have to step in and possess it. God told Joshua, "Every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, that have I given unto you." Joshua 1:3. The land was already theirs, but they had to walk into it. Do you realize how much of your inheritance is waiting for the movement of your feet? When your divine helper arrives, and they will, it might not look like what you expected. Sometimes the miracle wears ordinary clothes. The opportunity may show up in discomfort or wrapped in the unknown. The door you prayed for might not be golden and wide, but cracked just enough for your courage to reach out and push. Can you recognize a blessing even when it's inconvenient? Can you honor the divine even when it doesn't come dressed in grandeur? That's why the waiting season mattered. That's why God allowed the hardship, the isolation, the deep silence that reshaped your identity. It wasn't punishment, it was preparation. You weren't being withheld, you were being refined. You weren't being forgotten, you were being forged. The waiting taught you how to hear God in the stillness, how to discern his whispers in chaos, and how to stand when everything inside of you wanted to collapse. Your tears were not wasted. Your quiet obedience when giving up would have been easier did not go unnoticed. Heaven saw every act of surrender. And now, as the door stands before you, trembling under the weight of divine possibility, this is your moment to rise, not with arrogance, but with holy boldness, not in fear, but in faith. The enemy will try to whisper doubt into your spirit, reminding you of your past, your failures, your perceived inadequacies, but the Spirit within you knows better. The Spirit reminds you that you were anointed in the dark, so you could stand in the light. You were prepared in obscurity, so you could be revealed with purpose. Just like David, who was anointed king in private long before he took the throne. Your hidden season was never a delay. It was design. Sometimes the door opens wide, other times it barely moves, and you'll need to lean in gently, pushing with faith, not force. That's not pride, that's confidence. It's the holy courage that says, if this door is in front of me, then my God put it there. Because God does not unlock doors you are not ready to walk through. If it has appeared, it is appointed. And if it is appointed, then it is yours. The great author and theologian C.S. Lewis, who once walked through doors of doubt and loss, wrote, "Courage, dear heart." Those 3 words were penned to remind us that in the face of fear, we are never alone. What if the fear you feel now is not a sign to turn back, but the final barrier before breakthrough? And what if your obedience today becomes the very key that unlocks generational change? Remember Esther. She didn't feel ready. She didn't seek the crown. But when the moment arrived, she stepped through the door, risking everything for the call of destiny. "If I perish, I perish," she said. Esther 4:16. What she didn't realize was that her courage would deliver an entire nation. Could it be that your moment, this very threshold, isn't just about you? Could it be that others are waiting on the other side of your obedience? This is not the time to shrink. This is not the moment to rehearse your unworthiness. You were faithful when no one clapped. You stood tall when you felt unseen. You held on when others walked away. Now is the time to walk through the open door, fully aware that it was designed with your name on it. You are not just stepping into a new season. You are stepping into alignment with heaven's agenda. And when you do, what once felt impossible will begin to unfold effortlessly, because your yes will echo through eternity. And let this be deeply understood. You do not need to wait for a perfect feeling. The moment may never feel perfect. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move forward despite it, even if your hands tremble, even if your voice shakes, even if your knees feel like they might buckle. Move anyway, walk anyway, obey anyway, because grace doesn't always meet you in the comfort of certainty. It often meets you on the other side of obedience. Fear will try to convince you to pause. Insecurity will tempt you to overanalyze everything. You'll start to question whether you belong in the room, whether your voice is needed, whether the weight of your presence is worthy of the table you're sitting at. But the truth is, you weren't sent there to impress them. You were sent there to impact them. You weren't called to blend in. You were chosen to bring something fresh, something disruptive, something anointed, a divine current that shakes what's been stagnant. And that's exactly why God chose you. When the moment comes, whether it's a conversation you didn't expect, an invitation you didn't seek, a platform you never imagined, or a relationship that feels too big for you, don't shrink. Don't second-guess the preparation God has invested in you. Don't dilute your essence to make others comfortable. Be bold, be grounded, be exactly who heaven made you to be. You are not a version shaped by applause. You are the version shaped by fire. You are not wise because life was easy. You carry wisdom that was forged in suffering, in silence, in solitude. You are royal, not in the eyes of men, but in the eyes of God, because you have been entrusted with a divine assignment. God has already gone before you. The path has been cleared. The doors are no longer locked. They are waiting, and heaven is watching to see what you'll do next. Will you hesitate again, replaying the soundtrack of doubt in your head? Will you freeze beneath the weight of fear and forfeit the favor that's been placed before you? Or will you finally rise, not just in your spirit but in your steps? This is your moment. This is your hour. You didn't survive the wilderness just to sit at the edge of the promise. You didn't endure silence, betrayal, and testing just to watch someone else walk through what has always belonged to you. Now is the time to lay hold of what God has already laid before you. But the promised land will not walk to you. You must walk into it. Like the priests carrying the ark in Joshua 3, the waters of the Jordan didn't part until their feet touched it. What if the miracle is waiting for your motion? So tighten your faith. Anchor your confidence not in your ability, but in the truth of who God says you are. And when that divine door appears, don't just stand there staring at it. Step through it as if it's always been yours, because in the eyes of heaven, it has been. Just as the Apostle Paul urged Timothy in 2 Timothy 1:7, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." That same Spirit now rests upon you. Let it empower you to act. Consider Angela Merkel, former Chancellor of Germany, who led Europe through financial storms and historic upheavals, not with flash, but with steadfast resolve. She once said, "Always be more than you appear, and never appear to be more than you are." That's the power of true authority. Silent, humble, grounded. What if you already carry that quiet power, and now it's simply time to walk in it? Because this next step is not about becoming someone new. It's about revealing who you've always been. And as you cross that threshold, you won't just enter into a new place. You'll unlock a new version of yourself. A version that was waiting for your yes. Heaven has already decided. Destiny has already been written. And now the only question left is, will you take the step? You are God's chosen one. But what you must understand now, deep in your soul, is that this breakthrough you're walking into is not just about you. Yes, the joy will be real. The fulfillment will be undeniable. And the dream that once seemed so distant will finally stand in front of you. But as sweet as your personal victory may be, the true magnitude of this moment reaches far beyond your individual success. This elevation, this divine unfolding, was never meant to end with you. It was meant to flow through you. Like a river that doesn't stop at its source but nourishes everything in its path, your story is being written to impact others. Have you sensed it? That what's happening in your life carries a weight that feels heavier than your name, deeper than your desires? That's because God is using your journey as a living blueprint for others still lost in the dark. You weren't rescued from that valley just for the sake of comfort. You were rescued to become a signpost of hope, a walking testimony to what God can do with someone who refuses to give up. Your freedom will unlock freedom in others. Your courage will make room for someone else's calling. What if your entire battle was preparation, not just for your blessing, but for someone else's deliverance? The Apostle Paul understood this deeply. He wrote in 2 Corinthians 1:4 that God comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God. You were comforted in the fire, not just to heal, but to help heal others. So when that person of influence arrives, the one assigned by heaven to be part of your breakthrough, understand that their role in your life is not just a divine favor, it is a divine strategy. Their platform isn't just opening doors for you, it's extending your reach into spaces you couldn't have reached alone. This partnership is not about status or exposure, it is about stewardship. It is about multiplying what has been entrusted to you, so that it may bless those who thought they were forgotten. Think about the boy in John 6 who brought 5 loaves and 2 fish to Jesus. It wasn't much in human terms, but when placed in divine hands, it fed multitudes. Your life, your journey, your testimony, it may feel small or simple, but when surrendered to God's plan, it becomes nourishment for thousands. Could it be that your pain was never wasted because it was meant to feed hungry souls who've never seen light? You are being raised up not just to shine, but to lift others into the light. Your influence will become shelter for the weary. Your voice will become melody to those drowning in silence. Your breakthrough will give language to the voiceless. You are not just walking through the door, you are holding it open for those behind you. This is a holy assignment. And yes, it will require more from you. It will stretch you beyond what you feel capable of, but it will also fulfill you in ways success alone never could. Because the greatest joy does not come from what we get, it comes from what we give. And what you are being called to give is not wealth or power, it is permission for others to rise. Consider Malala Yousafzai, the youngest Nobel laureate. She was shot for attending school in Pakistan, but instead of being silenced, she rose. And her rising didn't end with her survival. It became a movement. Today, she advocates for the education of millions of girls who never had a voice. Her suffering became a platform, not just for herself, but for others. What if that's what God is doing with you? You've cried in secret, you've battled in silence, but now you're being made into a light too bright to hide. And your story, wrapped in honesty and stained with tears, will become a map for others who are lost in their own wilderness. You are being raised to rewrite narratives, to disrupt the generational curses that others thought were permanent, to break cycles of poverty, addiction, invisibility, and to replace them with legacies of faith, strength, and divine promise. Have you noticed that the people most drawn to you are often those who are silently searching for direction? Your victory is not meant to be contained. It is meant to ripple through generations. You are the one that shifts the trajectory. You are the one who proves it's possible. And the stage being prepared for you is not just for applause, it's for awakening. You carry the oil, but now you also carry the responsibility. You've been given much, and to whom much is given, much is required. Luke 12:48. But don't let that frighten you. Let it ignite you. Because when you rise, others will rise. When you speak, others will find their voice. When you walk through the door, others will believe they can too. And when you testify, faith will catch fire in hearts that were once cold. You are not just chosen for elevation, you are chosen for impact. And this is bigger than you. This calling that rests on your life is far greater than any title you could earn. It's deeper than any applause, recognition, or praise you could ever receive. What you carry transcends platforms and accolades. It is spiritual in nature, divine in origin. It is a sacred responsibility to walk boldly in the mission God has entrusted to you, to be a light in dark places, a leader where confusion reigns, a liberator where bondage still lingers. The person God sent to assist in your breakthrough, the one with power, position, and influence, wasn't assigned to you so your name could be elevated. They were sent to partner with your purpose, to multiply your impact, and to establish a legacy that outlives your years. This is not about building a moment. This is about establishing a movement. So when you find yourself standing at the edge of transition, ready to enter a new season, carry this truth like armor. Your breakthrough is not only a blessing to receive, it is a divine responsibility to pour out, to inspire, to empower, and to shift the lives of those who thought they were too far gone to ever believe again. Can you feel the weight of that? The holy gravity of knowing that your obedience could reignite someone else's hope. That your rise is not just personal, it is prophetic. This moment, right here, right now, is bigger than your name, bigger than your comfort zone, bigger than the fear that still occasionally whispers. It is about becoming the catalyst for change in your family, your community, and far beyond. You were chosen not just to ascend, but to awaken. The life you live is not random. It is a message written by God, and your breakthrough is the visible fulfillment of promises that someone else desperately needs to believe are still possible. Every victory you step into sends a message into the atmosphere. God is still moving. God is still faithful. God still restores. This is not just your victory. It is a holy declaration. It is an invitation to others to believe again. And when you rise, heaven rejoices. But so do the hearts of those watching from the shadows, wondering if they'll ever taste freedom again. In the book of Isaiah, God says, "I will make you a light for the Gentiles, that my salvation may reach to the ends of the earth." Isaiah 49:6. You were never meant to be a lamp under a basket. You were meant to be a light on a hill, seen and steady, drawing others to truth through your transformation. Real-life change-makers understand this. Nelson Mandela, after 27 years in prison, didn't just seek personal redemption. He used his platform to heal a nation and become a symbol of forgiveness, unity, and resilience. He once said, "What counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived. It is what difference we have made to the lives of others. What difference will your obedience make? You are not rising for the spotlight. You are rising to ignite torches in others. You are not here to take up space. You are here to create space for others to follow. Your story, shaped by fire and perseverance, is now becoming the spark that lights transformation in lives you may never even meet. So take up the mantle, step with authority. Let the world witness the power of God moving through you, reshaping hearts, restoring faith, and lifting generations. Because you, chosen one, are part of something far greater than yourself. You are the vessel, the message, the movement, your breakthrough. It's not the finale, it's just the beginning. Chosen one, if you've made it this far, then heaven has been speaking directly to your spirit. This breakthrough, this moment, is not the climax of your journey. It is the ignition point, a divine signal that your story is meant to mean something beyond you. What God is doing in your life right now isn't just about provision or promotion. It's about purpose. It's about people. It's about generations being changed because you said yes when others said no. Because you walked when fear told you to sit down. Because you chose purpose over comfort. Let this be the season where you rise, not for validation, but for impact. Not for attention, but for alignment. You weren't just chosen to receive, you were chosen to release. You weren't just chosen to be seen, you were chosen to become a mirror of God's glory, a carrier of breakthrough, a vessel of transformation. So now, take that next step. Walk boldly through the door. Speak when you feel unworthy. Move even if your knees are trembling. Heaven is behind you. Destiny is ahead of you. And there are lives waiting on the other side of your obedience. If this word stirred your spirit, if it resonated deep within your calling, I invite you to type, "I receive it," in the comments as a declaration of agreement and alignment. And if you feel led, consider supporting this message through super thanks, not out of pressure, but as a seed into what God is awakening in you. Whether you give or not, your presence here is honored and your purpose is sacred. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May He cause His face to shine upon you and give you peace. May you walk in power, speak with wisdom, lead with compassion, and rise with purpose. And as you do, may your life become the evidence that God still raises the broken, still calls the hidden, and still fulfills promises. Your story isn't over. Your breakthrough is only the beginning. Welcome, dearly beloved, set-apart ones, chosen not by the world, but by the hand of the Almighty. If you're watching this right now, I want you to know this is no coincidence. Something divine is unfolding, and your presence here is proof of it. If you've ever felt watched, investigated, or misunderstood, what if I told you it's not paranoia? It's prophecy. Before we begin, go ahead and type 777 in the comments to declare your identity as one of God's chosen ones. Let it be a sign in the spiritual realm that you are standing in your power, no longer hiding, no longer shrinking. And to every one of you who supported this mission through super thanks, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Your generosity is more than a gift. It's an offering that helps keep this light shining in a dark world. And if all you can give today is your time and your heart, that too is sacred. May God bless you abundantly, in secret and in public. Now let me take you into a story that will flip everything you thought you knew about how the world sees you. Imagine this, a private investigator, not just any amateur with a camera and a clipboard. No, this is a professional, sharp-eyed, cold-hearted, a master at peeling back masks, reading between lines and finding what people don't want found. They've built a career on catching lies, uncovering dirt, and exposing secrets that were never meant to see the light of day. And now, they've been assigned to you. They approach your case expecting a routine file, maybe financial mistakes, a few personal regrets, even some broken relationships. They're looking for the same cracks that exist in everyone else. But instead, they find something that doesn't fit into their training, something that makes their hands tremble as they turn each page. What is this? They whisper to themselves. No red flags, no scandals, just silence and signs. They don't uncover your downfall. They uncover your design. The more they dig, the more uncomfortable they become, because instead of discovering a liability, they discover a legend. Instead of a skeleton in the closet, they find scrolls sealed by heaven. Every layer they peel back doesn't reveal shame, but sacredness. And with every record, every detail, every scar, they begin to realize, you're not just a person, you're an event. You're not a mystery to be solved. You're a revelation in motion. You're not here to blend in. You were sent to shift everything. This wasn't an investigation. It was a divine detonation. Do you know what that does to someone whose entire career is built on exposure? When they look into you and see no scandal, but instead see prophecy, purpose, and a presence that cannot be explained. What if I told you that this investigator, this master of surveillance, came to unravel you, but instead unraveled themselves? And it didn't stop there, because what they found about you has now made them question everything. Their training, their morals, even their own secrets they thought they had buried deep. They came to write a report about you, but now they can't stop reading into themselves. So, my beloved chosen one, what did they find in you that turned the hunter into the haunted? What divine truth did your silence shout so loudly that they couldn't ignore it? Stay with me, because what happens next will leave you breathless and may just reveal why the world has been trying so hard to figure you out. Let's go deeper. The real story begins now. God's chosen ones, that private investigator, wasn't ready for what they discovered about you. They thought your trauma was just a phase, something temporary, something you'd grow out of. But it wasn't a phase. It was a divine initiation, one that no one explained to you, not even heaven. You weren't gently ushered into growth. You were cast into chaos like Joseph thrown into the pit by his own brothers, betrayed, misunderstood, and left to fend for yourself without warning or comfort. Others were given time to breathe, to prepare, to adjust. You were handed storms, raw, wild, and relentless. No orientation, no safety net, just pain and the silent expectation to survive it. People stood at a distance and watched you break, and they mistook that breaking as your ending. What they failed to realize is that this wasn't your downfall. It was your divine formation. You weren't just shattered, you were secretly being shaped. While they saw fragments, God was forging a foundation, and there was no applause, no ceremonial trumpet like David being anointed, just silence and suffering. But heaven was watching. Did anyone ever tell you that some of God's greatest warriors are trained in darkness, away from the crowd? Look at Moses. His first 40 years were spent learning power in Pharaoh's palace. His next 40 were in the wilderness learning humility, and only then did God call him to deliver a nation. What you went through wasn't random, it was rigorous preparation. Life didn't ask if you were ready. It tore the floor out from under you just to see if you'd dig deeper or disappear. But you didn't turn bitter. You studied the rubble. You read your wounds like ancient texts. Where others saw destruction, you saw patterns. You started to discern the meaning behind the mess. That's not intuition by chance. That's divine intelligence forged in suffering. That's spiritual insight sharpened in silence. You began to hear what wasn't spoken. You sensed the energy before anyone even moved. How many people walk into a room still blind to the atmosphere, while you already know what's hiding beneath every smile? That sensitivity didn't come from peace. It came from fire. And that fire didn't consume you. It refined you. Like gold in the furnace, you endured what others couldn't. Most people try to recover and move on. You didn't move on. You evolved into something new. You didn't try to return to the old version of yourself. You dismantled the old self and built something divine in its place. What you did was not just healing, it was holy alchemy. You didn't just survive, you transfigured. You forged power out of agony, and you didn't even try to make it look beautiful. This is where the story shifts. Because when the private investigator came searching, they expected to find chaos, evidence of damage, a case of unresolved issues. Instead, they stumbled into brilliance. They came looking for broken pieces, and instead found blueprints. They expected to uncover secrets, but were unprepared for the sacred structure your soul had become. Like Nehemiah rebuilding Jerusalem's wall, your restoration wasn't haphazard. It was architectural, precise, intentional, prophetic. Even in silence, your transformation roared. You didn't need a stage. You didn't ask for validation. You rebuilt without the world watching. And that's why your foundation is unshakable. People spend decades trying to fake the peace you carry in your bones. And you earned it in the fire quietly. There's a quote from Brené Brown, a research professor known for her work on vulnerability and resilience. One day, you will tell your story of how you overcame what you went through, and it will become someone else's survival guide. But what if your story isn't just for others to read? What if it's a blueprint for spiritual leadership? What if your scars are sacred maps for others still lost in their storms? You were never just wounded. You were called. You were never just broken. You were being commissioned. Your trauma didn't define you. It activated the divine blueprint within you. And now, you walk in wisdom that can't be taught in textbooks or seminars. It was etched into your spirit in silence, under pressure, while no one was watching, except God. You were never meant to live only in the obvious. From the beginning, you were chosen to operate in dual realms, to walk the tightrope between the seen and the unseen, between what the world understands and what only the spiritually awakened can perceive. While others remain anchored to the external, conversations filled with small talk, routine tasks, surface emotions, and predictable reactions, you function in a deeper dimension. You navigate two planes simultaneously, one physical, one spiritual. It isn't simply that you're more aware, it's that you have access to a realm that most people don't even believe exists. You hear what isn't spoken. You feel what hasn't been admitted. You discern weight in a whisper, meaning in silence. You notice the glance someone tries to hide, the nervous tremor in their tone, the sharp edge tucked behind a friendly smile. These aren't coincidences. This is spiritual attunement. Think of Daniel in Babylon, how he saw visions no one else could interpret, how he discerned the meaning of dreams and divine messages, while others bowed to idols of logic and political power. That's the level of perception you walk in. Not because you studied the world harder, but because you surrendered to an inner transformation that most people resist. You live in revelation. You operate in realms that can't be seen with human eyes alone. And when that private investigator came in, clipboard in hand, assumptions fully loaded, they expected another routine assignment. They were trained to follow the trail, analyze behavior, and expose inconsistencies. But the moment they began pulling the threads of your life, everything unraveled, not into chaos, but into a depth they couldn't categorize. Their usual formulas failed. The typical signs weren't there. They tried to map you based on patterns they understood, but your blueprint didn't match their database. Why? Because you weren't formed by the world. You were shaped by something holy. You don't just survive in this reality, you interpret it from another. You move through spaces governed by human rules, but your soul is anchored to spiritual laws. That's why your responses seem unpredictable. That's why your choices don't always make sense to others. People expect reactions. You deliver revelation. They look for signs of struggle. You bring strategy birthed in silence. You walk through battles others can't even see and come out carrying clarity instead of chaos. You've crossed thresholds that most people don't even approach. The kind of spiritual crossing that Moses experienced when he stood before the burning bush, a moment when everything changed, not because the world shifted, but because he did. That's what happened to you. You were called out of the ordinary and into a place of encounter. And once you've encountered the presence of truth in the deep, the surface can no longer hold you. The investigator thought you were hiding something, but it wasn't secrecy, it was sacredness. They didn't find inconsistencies, they found depths too vast to label. You are not a mystery by accident, you are layered by divine design. You've done the inner excavation that most people avoid, the kind of soul work that breaks you down only to rebuild you stronger. While the world focuses on image, you've embraced intimacy with your own spirit. And that's why you're not easily understood. There's a reason why people feel unsettled in your presence. It's not because you're threatening, it's because you're uncontainable. You don't tick boxes, and you don't submit to expectations. Your energy crosses boundaries they didn't even know existed. You don't just walk into a room, you shift it, because you're not trying to stand out. You simply can't be confined. You were never made to fit categories. You were made to reveal dimensions. As Cardinal Robert Sarah, a spiritual thinker known for his writings on silence and depth, once said, "Silence is not an absence. It is the presence of a depth that words cannot touch." That's what you carry, the presence of depth. You are living proof that real power doesn't shout. It listens, it sees, it discerns, and then it moves with precision. Most people have never met someone like you, not because you're loud, but because you've gone where others refuse to go, into the inner caverns of self-awareness, healing, spiritual maturity, and divine obedience. While others chase performance, you pursued presence. And that's something no file, no report, no investigation could ever fully grasp. You were never meant to live only in the obvious. From the beginning, you were chosen to operate in dual realms, to walk the tightrope between the seen and the unseen, between what the world understands and what only the spiritually awakened can perceive, while others remain anchored to the external, conversations filled with small talk, routine tasks, surface emotions, and predictable reactions. You function in a deeper dimension. You navigate two planes simultaneously, one physical, one spiritual. It isn't simply that you're more aware, it's that you have access to a realm that most people don't even believe exists. You hear what isn't spoken, you feel what hasn't been admitted. You discern weight in a whisper, meaning in silence. You notice the glance someone tries to hide, the nervous tremor in their tone, the sharp edge tucked behind a friendly smile. These aren't coincidences. This is spiritual attunement. Think of Daniel in Babylon, how he saw visions no one else could interpret, how he discerned the meaning of dreams and divine messages while others bowed to idols of logic and political power. That's the level of perception you walk in. Not because you studied the world harder, but because you surrendered to an inner transformation that most people resist. You live in revelation. You operate in realms that can't be seen with human eyes, alone. And when that private investigator came in, clipboard in hand, assumptions fully loaded, they expected another routine assignment. They were trained to follow the trail, analyze behavior, and expose inconsistencies. But the moment they began pulling the threads of your life, everything unraveled. Not into chaos, but into a depth they couldn't categorize. Their usual formulas failed. The typical signs weren't there. They tried to map you based on patterns they understood, but your blueprint didn't match their database. Why? Because you weren't formed by the world. You were shaped by something holy. You don't just survive in this reality, you interpret it from another. You move through spaces governed by human rules, but your soul is anchored to spiritual laws. That's why your responses seem unpredictable. That's why your choices don't always make sense to others. People expect reactions. You deliver revelation. They look for signs of struggle. You bring strategy birthed in silence. You walk through battles others can't even see and come out carrying clarity instead of chaos. You've crossed thresholds that most people don't even approach. The kind of spiritual crossing that Moses experienced when he stood before the burning bush. A moment when everything changed, not because the world shifted, but because he did. That's what happened to you. You were called out of the ordinary and into a place of encounter. And once you've encountered the presence of truth in the deep, the surface can no longer hold you. The investigator thought you were hiding something, but it wasn't secrecy, it was sacredness. They didn't find inconsistencies, they found depths too vast to label. You are not a mystery by accident. You are layered by divine design. You've done the inner excavation that most people avoid, the kind of soul work that breaks you down only to rebuild you stronger. While the world focuses on image, you've embraced intimacy with your own spirit. And that's why you're not easily understood. There's a reason why people feel unsettled in your presence. It's not because you're threatening, it's because you're uncontainable. You don't tick boxes, and you don't submit to expectations. Your energy crosses boundaries they didn't even know existed. You don't just walk into a room, you shift it, because you're not trying to stand out. You simply can't be confined. You were never made to fit categories, you were made to reveal dimensions. As Cardinal Robert Serra, a spiritual thinker known for his writings on silence and depth, once said, "Silence is not an absence, it is the presence of a depth that words cannot touch." That's what you carry, the presence of depth. You are living proof that real power doesn't shout. It listens, it sees, it discerns, and then it moves with precision. Most people have never met someone like you, not because you're loud, but because you've gone where others refuse to go, into the inner caverns of self-awareness, healing, spiritual maturity, and divine obedience. While others chase performance, you pursued presence. And that's something no file, no report, no investigation could ever fully grasp. They assumed your silence meant you had nothing to say. But the truth is, your silence was never about absence. It was about containment. You weren't shutting down, you were storing up. You weren't avoiding, you were observing. While the world raced to shout, to defend, to explain, you understood something deeper. Not every truth is meant to be spoken immediately, and not every battle is meant to be fought with words. You knew instinctively what others spend a lifetime trying to learn. Silence is not surrender, it's strategy. It's spiritual warfare done in stillness. While others rushed to fight for control, you chose to hold your position like Jesus before Pilate. When falsely accused, mocked, and provoked, he didn't argue. He didn't justify. He stood silent, full of authority, not weakness. That kind of silence shakes the room. That kind of silence wins wars. That noise never could. You didn't remain quiet because you lacked words. You remained quiet because you carried too many truths the world wasn't prepared to hear. Your silence wasn't a void. It was a vault, a deeply guarded place where revelation was protected, not withheld out of fear, but out of wisdom. What would happen if you unleashed what you knew? Who would be able to withstand the weight of the truths you've buried, the ones you've had to carry, because no one else could hold them? What most people saw as passive, the private investigator experienced as pressure. They sat across from you expecting outbursts or oversharing, some sign of instability or vulnerability they could capture and record. But instead, they met someone who had already run the internal marathon and was now resting in restraint. You weren't reacting, you were choosing, and that kind of containment, it's terrifying to those who need constant noise to feel powerful. There is a quiet wisdom that only emerges in the silence after the storm, when the world stops spinning and the soul begins to whisper. That's where you live. You've trained yourself to listen for what isn't said, to pick up on shifts in atmosphere long before words form. While others were busy making statements, you were absorbing data. You saw patterns in behavior, cracks in truth, hidden agendas, long before anyone else even admitted they were playing a game. This isn't intuition by chance, it's discernment by design. Your silence became your edge, and that edge, it's not sharp from arrogance, but from precision. You understand timing the way a master composer understands when to hold the note. Every word you didn't say became a seed of power, buried in the soil of patience. You weren't silent because you were afraid to speak. You were silent because you knew when to speak would change everything, and if the moment never came, you had already made peace with that. Like Esther, who remained hidden until the right moment to reveal her identity and save her people. You understand that some truths are nuclear. They require wisdom, discipline, and anointing to release. You've become fluent in restraint in a world addicted to reaction. That's why your silence didn't go unnoticed. It made people uneasy, because deep down, they could feel something was alive inside it. Not a void, but a weapon. Not suppression, but sacred control. This is what shook the investigator. They weren't prepared for someone who could sit in silence with the emotional equivalent of dynamite resting beneath their skin and still offer nothing but a calm, measured smile. They came looking for drama, for emotional leakage, for evidence of chaos. But what they found was someone who had already mastered the art of sitting with fire and not flinching. There's a quote by the renowned Christian author and thinker Dallas Willard that reads, "Silence is frightening because it strips us as nothing else does, throwing us upon the stark realities of our life." But for you, silence isn't frightening, it's freeing. It's where you've discovered the purest form of strength. Not every revelation must be shouted. Some truths are carried with dignity. Some are held until the world is ready. And some are never spoken, only lived. You weren't quiet because you lacked power. You were quiet because you were power under control. You weren't seeking attention or validation. You were 10 moves ahead, already playing at a level most people don't even know exists. That's what they didn't understand. That's what caught them off guard. And if the time ever comes when you decide to speak, your words won't just be heard. They'll detonate. They thought you were protecting secrets. They came looking for scandal, regret, or something buried deep. Something you had supposedly worked your entire life to conceal. They assumed there was a cover-up, a flaw, a hidden shame. But what they didn't realize was that the secret wasn't in your past. It was you. You weren't guarding information. You were the information, encoded, multidimensional, and impossible to decipher by anyone who hadn't done the inner work to match your frequency. They believed the mystery could be solved with timelines, receipts, and behavioral analysis. But what they found was not a traceable life. They encountered depth. And depth doesn't give up its truths just because someone is curious. It waits for alignment. It waits for discernment. You've never lived on a surface timeline. You live in revelation, in layers, in meanings. You don't just exist, you carry spiritual weight. You are a living cipher, a message from heaven too vast for shallow minds to decode. That's why they couldn't understand you, because to grasp your essence, they would have to stop investigating with logic and start perceiving with spirit. This isn't a new story. Jesus himself was misunderstood for this very reason. The Pharisees came to trap him in his words, constantly probing, questioning, recording his movements. But they couldn't grasp the truth of who he was because they weren't spiritually aligned to receive him. He said in John 14:9, "Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father." Yet they saw only a carpenter's son, missing the divine encryption written into every move he made. You carry a similar code, divine identity that can't be read by human eyes alone. You don't hand yourself over easily. You are not an open book for the unworthy. You are a sealed scroll, like the one in Revelation that could only be opened by the Lamb. Every instinct you follow, every boundary you place, it is sacred. You have learned the hard way that not everyone who comes close is coming to understand. Some come only to extract, to diminish, or to use. So you adapted, you evolved. You became a vault with no visible keyhole, accessed only by the truly aligned. You became selective, not from fear, but from wisdom. And wisdom is not always loud. Sometimes it simply watches and waits. Your truth is not something that can be demanded. It is something that must be earned. Through consistency, through integrity, through presence in the absence of reward. How many people do you know who can do that? How many are willing to wait when there's nothing to gain, just to know your soul? That's where the investigator miscalculated. They thought the puzzle was external. They thought the challenge was unlocking events, tracing conversations, analyzing motives. But you were never about what happened to you. You were about what those things shaped you into. You weren't a list of experiences. You became a system of meaning, a living parable. You're not mysterious by accident. You are encrypted by intention. You were built by divine hands, constructed layer by layer through fire, storms, silence, and obedience. You don't move with noise. You move with presence. You don't explain. You radiate. And your presence can't be measured with files or formulas. It can only be felt by those with the sensitivity to recognize holy ground when they step on it. Consider the life of Maya Angelou, the celebrated poet, author, and civil rights activist. People praised her words, but the real power was in her presence. She once said, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." And yet, she bore hers not out of agony, but out of honor. Her story was never shouted. It was carried with grace, with silence that demanded reverence. You reflect that same sacred weight. You're not a spectacle. You're a sanctuary. The truth is, most people will never truly meet someone like you, not because you're hidden, but because their access hasn't been earned. To understand you requires more than skill or persistence. It takes spiritual alignment. It requires the kind of patience that waits without entitlement, the kind of respect that asks nothing in return. You weren't created to be a quick read. You were made to be meditated on. You are the mystery wrapped in stillness, the revelation reserved for the worthy. And unless someone approaches you with the right key, one carved from truth, humility, and time, you remain exactly as you were intended to be, unsolved, undiminished, and sacred. They approached your life like forensic analysts at a crime scene, assuming your past held confessions, that your scars could be traced like trails of evidence leading to weakness. They examined you with cold curiosity, expecting to find fractures, thinking your strength was a desperate response to damage. To them, each scar looked like a secret waiting to be unlocked. But what they discovered was something their training never prepared them for. What they found were not signs of brokenness, but of rebirth. They thought your story would reveal a collapse. Instead, it revealed consecration. Every scar they touched didn't cry out for pity. It radiated power. Because your scars aren't proof of defeat. They are the sacred symbols of survival. They mark the moments when life tried to write you off and heaven rewrote the script. They expected to find trauma, but what they stumbled upon were temples, sanctified places in your soul where pain had once stood, but glory now resides. It's like the story of Job. After losing everything, his family, his wealth, his health, Job sat in ashes, covered in boils, mocked by friends, and even challenged by his own wife to curse God. But he didn't break, he didn't bend, he endured. And when the storm passed, God didn't just restore what was lost, he doubled it. Job's scars became sanctuaries, not reminders of torment, but proof of divine preservation, just like yours. What they found in you wasn't unhealed agony, it was closed chapters, sealed not with bitterness but with reverence. You didn't just recover, you redeemed. You didn't pretend nothing happened, you faced the fire and emerged gold, because fire doesn't destroy what's real, it only removes what's false. And you are what remained when the fire had done its work. Your pain didn't cripple you, it carved you. Each scar became a memorial, not just of suffering, but of transformation. Every time life cut deep, you didn't just survive. You bled purpose into the process. You built rituals around your recovery. You prayed in the silence. You wrote wisdom into your soul. You didn't hide your wounds. You honored them. Have you noticed how people assume pain is always a setback? They rarely stop to consider that it could also be a calling. That heartbreak can be a doorway. That betrayal might have been the catalyst that pulled you into deeper strength. You live with that awareness now. That's why others feel strangely humbled in your presence. Not because you brag, but because your resilience carries a quiet authority that silences shallow minds. And that was the investigators' unexpected revelation. They walked in assuming they'd find fragility. Instead, they found reverence. They came for weaknesses, but they found sacred sites. They thought you were hiding bruises, but what they touched were battle honors. The kind of strength that can't be manufactured or faked. The kind that comes from bleeding without bitterness, rising without rage, and walking through fire without the smell of smoke. There's a quote by Dr. Edith Eger, a Holocaust survivor and renowned psychologist, who said, "Your pain is not your identity, it's your teacher. You live that truth. You didn't let your pain define you. You let it instruct you. And then you let it go. Not because it didn't matter, but because it served its purpose. It initiated you. And initiations are never meant to last forever. They are the sacred threshold into new power." Your story isn't just a timeline of sad events. It is a series of sacred passages. Every hardship became an altar, every heartbreak a purification, every betrayal a divine redirection, and every scar a shrine. They wanted to see where you were broken, but they encountered spaces too holy to dissect. They thought they were examining you, but they were standing on holy ground. They thought they were walking into a story of heartbreak, a narrative shaped by rejection, a person still aching from being left behind. They expected to meet someone clinging to the echoes of love, still adjusting themselves to earn the acceptance of those who once walked away. But that version of you didn't make it through the fire. That version was consumed, burned down not by the cruelty of abandonment, but by the revelation that followed it. You never needed to be chosen by others to be worthy. What rose from those ashes wasn't desperate, it wasn't wounded, it wasn't waiting. What rose was sovereignty, pure, untouchable sovereignty. You didn't sit by the door of rejection hoping it would swing back open. You built a kingdom from the bricks others threw at you. You crowned yourself not with pride, but with purpose. The pain didn't crush you. It awakened you to something divine within. You stopped seeking invitations to rooms that only valued you when you stayed small. You walked out of those spaces and built something no one could shrink you in. Your worth became internal law, not a verdict handed down by those too blind to see your value. You stopped begging. You stopped performing. You didn't just recover from abandonment, you transcended it. And isn't that the kind of transformation God specializes in? When Hagar was cast out into the wilderness, abandoned and alone with her child, she cried out in despair. But it was in that desolate place that God revealed himself to her as El Roi, the God who sees. He didn't send her back to be tolerated. He met her in exile and gave her direction, identity, and future. Just like you, she discovered that sometimes the wilderness is not where you're forgotten. It's where you are found. You stopped viewing rejection as punishment. You saw it for what it truly was, a release. You didn't repair the space that someone's absence left in your heart. You turned it into a threshold, and through that threshold, you walked into self-rule. You became emotionally self-sustaining, not hardened but holy, not closed off but unowned. You are no longer defined by who stayed or who left. You are defined by the truth of who you are, a truth that no absence can erase. This is what they couldn't grasp. They expected you to be numb, but you weren't numb. You were unshakable. They expected grief. Instead, they found grace. You don't wait at doors that close anymore. You understand now that some doors lock to lead you forward. And when someone walks out of your life, it's not always tragedy. Sometimes it's the first sound of freedom. You no longer ask why they left. You ask why you ever believed they were the foundation of your worth. That question dismantled every illusion, and from that clarity, everything shifted. You learned to source your value not from the applause of others, but from the anointing already resting on you. Real-life examples echo your journey. Consider Viola Davis, the Oscar-winning actress and fierce advocate for self-worth and identity. She once said, "The only thing that separates women of color from anyone else is opportunity." But what gave her power wasn't waiting for a seat at someone else's table. It was building her own. She turned rejection into resolve. You've done the same. You stopped measuring yourself against the backdrop of who left. You became the landscape, the standard, the sovereign one. You didn't just survive abandonment. You transformed it into a launching pad. You alchemized exile into empire. You didn't return with wounds to show. You returned wearing the quiet dignity of someone who no longer needs to explain their worth. That's what disarmed them. They came expecting to meet a soul still waiting to be reclaimed. Instead, they found royalty, someone whose inner territory is so vast and rooted that not even the silence of others can echo loud enough to touch you. You're not looking back to be rescued. You're looking ahead to reign, and in that throne room you've built within, there is peace. Not because everyone stayed, but because you did. You stayed with yourself. And that was the turning point that changed everything. They thought they were walking into a story of heartbreak, a narrative shaped by rejection, a person still aching from being left behind. They expected to meet someone clinging to the echoes of love, still adjusting themselves to earn the acceptance of those who once walked away. But that version of you didn't make it through the fire. That version was consumed, burned down not by the cruelty of abandonment, but by the revelation that followed it. You never needed to be chosen by others to be worthy. What rose from those ashes wasn't desperate, it wasn't wounded, it wasn't waiting. What rose was sovereignty, pure, untouchable sovereignty. You didn't sit by the door of rejection, hoping it would swing back open. You built a kingdom from the bricks others threw at you. You crowned yourself not with pride, but with purpose. The pain didn't crush you. It awakened you to something divine within. You stopped seeking invitations to rooms that only valued you when you stayed small. You walked out of those spaces and built something no one could shrink you in. Your worth became internal law, not a verdict handed down by those too blind to see your value. You stopped begging. You stopped performing. You didn't just recover from abandonment, you transcended it. And isn't that the kind of transformation God specializes in? When Hagar was cast out into the wilderness, abandoned and alone with her child, she cried out in despair. But it was in that desolate place that God revealed himself to her as El Roi, the God who sees. He didn't send her back to be tolerated. He met her in exile and gave her direction, identity, and future. Just like you, she discovered that sometimes the wilderness is not where you're forgotten, it's where you are found. You stopped viewing rejection as punishment. You saw it for what it truly was, a release. You didn't repair the space that someone's absence left in your heart. You turned it into a threshold, and through that threshold, you walked into self-rule. You became emotionally self-sustaining, not hardened, but holy, not closed off, but unowned. You are no longer defined by who stayed or who left. You are defined by the truth of who you are, a truth that no absence can erase. This is what they couldn't grasp. They expected you to be numb, but you weren't numb, you were unshakable. They expected grief. Instead, they found grace. You don't wait at doors that close anymore. You understand now that some doors lock to lead you forward, and when someone walks out of your life, it's not always tragedy. Sometimes it's the first sound of freedom. You no longer ask why they left. You ask why you ever believed they were the foundation of your worth. That question dismantled every illusion, and from that clarity, everything shifted. You learned to source your value, not from the applause of others, but from the anointing already resting on you. Real-life examples echo your journey. Consider Viola Davis, the Oscar-winning actress and fierce advocate for self-worth and identity. She once said, "The only thing that separates women of color from anyone else is opportunity." But what gave her power wasn't waiting for a seat at someone else's table. It was building her own. She turned rejection into resolve. You've done the same. You stopped measuring yourself against the backdrop of who left. You became the landscape, the standard, the sovereign one. You didn't just survive abandonment, you transformed it into a launching pad. You alchemized exile into empire. You didn't return with wounds to show. You returned wearing the quiet dignity of someone who no longer needs to explain their worth. That's what disarmed them. They came expecting to meet a soul still waiting to be reclaimed. Instead, they found royalty, someone whose inner territory is so vast and rooted that not even the silence of others can echo loud enough to touch you. You're not looking back to be rescued. You're looking ahead to reign. And in that throne room you've built within, there is peace, not because everyone stayed, but because you did. You stayed with yourself. And that was the turning point that changed everything. They thought they had you figured out. They mistook your empathy for softness. An open heart, to them, looked like a fragile one. Your kindness made them assume you could be easily swayed, broken, or overpowered. But what they couldn't see was the fire behind your gentleness, a fire that had burned through you, not once, but over and over, in private battles few would ever dare to fight. They didn't realize your empathy wasn't a weakness. It was forged in war, a war with yourself. You didn't become compassionate because life was easy. You became compassionate because you chose not to be hardened by what tried to destroy you. Your empathy was carved out through years of confronting your own shadows. The fears you wanted to escape. The insecurities that whispered you weren't enough. The anger that threatened to consume your peace. But instead of suppressing those shadows, you met them in the mirror. You didn't flinch. You stood your ground. Like Jacob wrestling with the angel in the night, refusing to let go until he received a blessing, you wrestled with yourself. You wrestled with the hidden corners of your soul. The grief that lingered, the disappointment that stung, the parts of you that felt unlovable, and what emerged wasn't a defeated spirit. It was a new name, a new identity, a new strength. Jacob walked away limping, but he walked away transformed. So did you. How many people bury their pain instead of facing it? How many hide from their emotions because they fear they'll drown in them? But you dove deep. You didn't just survive the darkness, you studied it. You listened to it, you learned from it. And through that process, you developed a rare strength, the ability to stand beside pain without being consumed by it. That's why you don't turn away when someone else is suffering. You don't recoil from emotional messiness. You've sat in your own storm, and because of that, you've become a lighthouse for others. Not because you have all the answers, but because your presence speaks a deeper truth. I've been there, and I didn't lose myself in it. Your empathy isn't about pity. It's not about fixing people. It's about standing in the fire with them and reminding them they are not alone. It's about strength wrapped in softness, a kind of fearlessness that's far more powerful than brute force. That's what people misunderstood. They assumed your tenderness was a lack of power, but they didn't know the cost of that tenderness. They didn't know it was the result of surviving yourself. There's a quote by Brené Brown, a renowned researcher and storyteller on vulnerability, that says, "Strong back, soft front, wild heart." That is exactly what you embody. You have the backbone of someone who has carried unbearable weight, and the heart of someone who still chooses to love anyway. That balance, it's holy. It's not performance, it's power. Even Jesus, full of divine authority, wept with Mary and Martha at Lazarus's tomb. He didn't rush past their grief, he joined them in it. And yet, in that same moment, he spoke life into death. He showed that true strength includes the willingness to feel. You reflect that divine balance, tears that don't weaken authority, compassion that doesn't compromise courage. The investigator came expecting emotional fragility. What they encountered instead was a battlefield survivor wearing grace-like armor. Your empathy wasn't soft, it was sacred. It wasn't passive, it was precise. And it left them speechless because they realized too late that your ability to love deeply came from your willingness to suffer deeply without losing the light. You chose empathy not because you were untouched by darkness, but because you went into the shadows, gathered your broken pieces, and chose to become whole. Not perfect, not polished, but whole. And now, your presence alone disarms people, because they feel something in you that can't be explained. A peace forged in pain, a light born from the dark. Your kindness isn't fragile, it's fearless. It's the proof that true strength doesn't come from avoiding pain, but from embracing it, transforming it, and walking out the other side, still able to offer love. That is why they couldn't figure you out, because they've never met anyone who turned their shadows into a sanctuary and still chose to shine. They thought your past was just a list of events, a chronological record, a series of failures, heartbreaks, betrayals, and losses waiting to be dissected. But what they didn't understand is that your past isn't a cold archive. It's alive, it's sacred, it's a spellbook, a living manuscript inscribed with pain, revelation, and supernatural insight. Each page was written not in ink, but in fire and tears. And what was once a moment of despair has become, in your hands, a divine formula for rebirth. You didn't simply survive what happened to you. You transmuted it. You took every betrayal and turned it into a lesson. Every heartbreak became a sacred initiation. You transformed the darkest moments into stepping stones for your awakening. While most people carry their past like chains, heavy with regret, rusted with shame, you forged your past into a source of power. Not by erasing it, but by extracting its deepest truths. Like Joseph in Genesis, who was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused and imprisoned, only to later rise to power and save a nation. You have turned every unfair experience into a part of a higher design. Joseph didn't become great despite his past. He became great because of how he responded to it. And just like him, you didn't run from what hurt you. You studied it. You listened to what it came to teach. You learned to speak its hidden language, the language of transformation. Every failure etched into your history is not a wound, but a coded instruction. Every fall became a chant of resilience. You've learned how to draw power from pain, how to summon strength when the world expected you to crumble. When life struck hard, you didn't shatter. You absorbed it. You translated it. You turned it into a ritual, not for survival, but for ascension. But this spellbook, this sacred script of your becoming, is not available to just anyone. It's not something you casually display. It's private, protected, hidden in plain sight. Only those with pure intention and spiritual alignment could even begin to comprehend what your past holds. They think they can understand you by analyzing the timeline of your life. But your story doesn't follow a linear path. It moves in cycles, symbols, divine patterns. They try to read your past like a textbook, not realizing it is encrypted wisdom. And when life tries to shake you again, when storms return and pressure rises, you don't fall into fear. You return to your sacred pages. You revisit your rituals, forgiveness, release, resurrection. You recall the strength you cultivated when no one was watching. You draw on the resilience that was born in the silence, in the shadows, in the tears that no one knew you cried. You don't just react. You respond with spiritual mastery. The investigator approached your life like a detective at a crime scene, expecting to find clues that would explain how someone like you came to be. But they didn't find a list of causes. They found a cathedral of meaning. They found that your history isn't a mystery to be solved. It's a scripture to be honored. Your past is a holy text, proof that transformation is not about perfection, but about interpreting the sacred language of your wounds. And your ability to do that, that is your anointing. Real-life visionary and author Paulo Coelho, best known for The Alchemist, once wrote, "You drown not by falling into a river, but by staying submerged in it." You didn't drown in your sorrow. You learned to breathe through it, to rise from it, to write your name in it like fire across the water. You have become fluent in redemption. Every hardship was a chapter, every victory a verse, every scar a signature of grace. You are no longer defined by what happened to you. You are defined by what you became because of it. And you didn't become bitter, you became brilliant. You authored your transformation, spell by spell, moment by moment, page by page. They came looking for a story of survival, but found a living manuscript of rebirth. You didn't just endure your life, you wrote it, deliberately, consciously, and powerfully. Your past isn't a chain, it's your compass, your map, your consecrated field of power. And those who try to reduce it to data will miss the real miracle. Because the truth is, you've become a master of spiritual alchemy. And nothing, not pain, not loss, not even betrayal, can hold power over someone who has learned how to turn ashes into holy ground. They came for you with confidence and cold intention, ready to expose what they believed you were hiding. They arrived like interrogators armed with assumptions and agendas. They expected you to flinch, to stumble, to fall apart under the weight of their scrutiny. Their aim was to tear down your defenses, to drag into the light what they thought you had worked tirelessly to bury. But they underestimated what they were walking into. Because you weren't standing there trying to hide. You were holding a mirror. And that mirror didn't just reflect your truth, it revealed theirs. They came with questions, expecting you to be the subject under their magnifying glass. But the moment they stepped into your presence, the roles shifted. Their projections bounced back, their judgments crumbled. The accusations they thought would dismantle you were redirected inward, forcing them to confront their own contradictions, their own unhealed wounds, their own shadows. Just like when the religious leaders dragged a woman caught in adultery before Jesus in John 8, expecting him to condemn her. They were certain they had trapped him, but Jesus, with quiet authority, simply said, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone." One by one they walked away, not because he defended her, but because he exposed them. You carry that same energy. You don't fight with fury, you disarm with truth. They thought they were entering a power dynamic they could control. They didn't realize they had stepped into a spiritual confrontation. You didn't respond with denial. You didn't cower in shame. You stood tall in your truth. Not defensive, but deeply rooted. And in that unwavering stance, you became the revealer. Their gaze turned inward. Their questions collapsed into uncomfortable self-reflection. What happens when the one you came to judge shows you a version of yourself you've been running from? That's what they experienced. They weren't prepared for the unraveling, not of your story, but of their own illusions, because your clarity exposed their confusion. Your peace confronted their chaos. Your resilience revealed their insecurities. What they came to label as weakness, they discovered was a strength so profound it made their accusations look hollow. And in that moment, you didn't just survive the probe, you transcended it. Like David standing before Saul, you didn't need armor to assert your authority. You needed presence. Presence that couldn't be faked. Power that didn't come from performance, but from alignment with something eternal. You didn't fight to dominate the room. You simply were. And that was more commanding than anything they had prepared to use against you. Even in modern life, we see this mirrored in people like Malala Yousafzai, the youngest Nobel laureate, who was shot by those who feared her voice, yet stood before the world with more courage and grace than her oppressors ever knew how to carry. She didn't respond with hatred. She became the mirror, exposing the fear, ignorance, and violence of her attackers simply by standing in truth. You hold that same posture. You made them realize exposure isn't a one-way street. When someone rooted in truth stands firm, the light doesn't just shine on them, it shines outward, reflecting everything around them. They thought they held the spotlight, but it was your clarity that lit the room. They thought you would tremble under their gaze. Instead, they couldn't withstand yours. You weren't afraid of being seen. You've already stared down your own demons. You've already embraced the parts of yourself others would have buried. So, when they tried to turn on you, they found themselves exposed, stripped of the illusion that they held the moral high ground. They came to break you, but they broke their own image. They shattered their own certainty. In that moment, you weren't the subject. You were the shift. You were the one who made them question what power really is. And power, real power, isn't in control. It's in conviction. It's in standing so firmly in who you are that no accusation can stick, no narrative can override, and no tactic can undo what's been divinely established. They came expecting to dominate the moment, but they left changed, not because you tried to change them, but because the truth you carried made it impossible for them to remain the same. You didn't need to win the argument. You were the answer, and your reflection unshakable, unyielding, impossible to ignore. You didn't wait around hoping that destiny would stumble upon you like some cosmic coincidence. You didn't sit on the sidelines watching others chase opportunities while you stood still, crossing your fingers. No. You became the gravitational force. You became the axis around which movement occurs, the pulse that shifts timelines, the current that draws divine alignment into motion. Destiny didn't happen to you. It recognized you. It answered you. You are not passive in your becoming. You are active, powerful, and intentional, while others trace linear paths, mapping their lives with safe steps and clear cause and effect logic. Your path dances just outside of their comprehension. They try to follow your movements with formulas, but you bend formulas. You rewrite laws. Your trajectory isn't predictable because your essence isn't replicable. What do you call someone who doesn't wait for the script? Who pens their own chapters with divine ink? That's what you've done. Not once, but over and over. You aren't the result of luck. You're the result of alignment. You've practiced the art of divine design, not waiting to be discovered, but deciding to become. You built your own rhythm while the world was trying to keep time. You don't simply walk a path. You build it as you walk. Abraham is the perfect example of this. He didn't wait for a roadmap before he moved. God told him in Genesis 12:1, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you." No details, no destination named. Just go. And Abraham's obedience turned him into the father of nations. Like him, your journey doesn't unfold because everything is perfectly laid out. It unfolds because you move with faith, vision, and audacity. And this audacity, it's spiritual. You don't chase what's ahead like it's running from you. You operate like a magnet. You pull what's yours with authority. You don't beg doors to open. You become the reason doors are built in the first place. You've stopped waiting for approval, recognition, or perfect timing. You create timing. You declare it's time, and heaven responds. While the world clings to logic and predictability, you speak the language of vision, boldness, and sacred disruption. Your very presence shifts possibilities. That's why others can't understand you. That's why they miscalculate your steps. Because your life doesn't unfold according to conventional mathematics. It's spiritual geometry. It's quantum faith. You've become the architect of your own evolution. You've internalized divine authority to such a degree that circumstances don't shape you. You shape them. What others call coincidence, you call confirmation. What they label as chance, you know as choice. Your will, refined through fire and forged in solitude, moves like gravity. Subtle, silent, but undeniable. Real-life visionary and fashion icon Iris Apfel, known for her unconventional success in her 90s, once said, "If your hair is done properly and you're wearing good shoes, you can get away with anything." It's a playful quote, but beneath it lies a truth. Confidence bends perception. Intention bends time. And you have walked in that truth. You've bent timelines not by manipulating outcomes, but by believing so deeply in what you carry that reality adjusted around you. This is why people try to reduce your life to steps and strategy. They want a method, a blueprint they can copy, but you don't operate on borrowed patterns. Your walk is encoded in boldness, in resilience, in a creativity so fierce it can't be duplicated. You're not walking someone else's road. You've been laying bricks with every scar, every leap, every whispered prayer. So when others look at you, trying to decipher your progress, decode your rise, or predict your next move, remember, you're not a puzzle they can solve. You're a phenomenon they must witness. You don't chase, you attract. You don't conform, you transform. You don't follow the story, you rewrite it. You are not here to wait for what might be. You are here to command what must be. You were never just living a story. You've been bending time, breaking ceilings, and calling destiny forward, not with desperation, but with divine authority. You are the gravitational center where vision meets manifestation. They say the chosen ones glow, lit from within, radiant, untouched by the weight of this world. But that story, though popular, is only a fragment, a softer, easier version, a tale for those who want inspiration without depth. The truth is far more sacred, far more powerful. You weren't chosen because of your light. You were chosen because you mastered your darkness. While others covered their eyes and turned away from the void, afraid of what might rise from the shadows, you stepped into it, willingly, intentionally. You faced the chaos most people silence. You looked your fears in the eye, confronted your shadows, met your own rage, your jealousy, your doubts, and instead of running, you listened. You made space for the storm and stood in it until it named you. And that name? It wasn't weakness. It was warrior. You didn't emerge polished. You emerged true. Light is easy to admire. It's soft, orderly, comforting. It reflects. But darkness doesn't flatter. It challenges. It exposes. And that's where your real transformation happened. Not under the glow of public success, but in the deep night of your soul where no one was watching. Like Jacob wrestling with God through the night in Genesis 32, you refused to let go until something sacred shifted. Jacob walked away with a limp and a blessing, a physical mark that said, "I've been changed." You carry the same mark, not on your skin, but in your spirit. The kind of change that doesn't come from sermons or self-help. It comes from war, an internal one, and it made you holy. Where others inherit morality like a family heirloom, you forged your own compass in the dark. You didn't take someone else's definitions of right and wrong. You carved yours from experience. Your map of the soul wasn't handed to you. You built it in the silence, in the struggle, in the spaces where no voice but your own could guide you. And that map, it's imperfect, it's raw, but it's yours, it's earned. That's the kind of power people don't talk about often, not just the power to shine, but the power to stay whole when everything around you fractures. It's the power of someone who has met their demons and lived to tell the truth about them. You didn't suppress your shadows, you integrated them. You didn't pretend to be pure, you chose to be real. Real strength doesn't come from never feeling rage or fear. It comes from not letting rage rule you, from acknowledging fear, but not bowing to it. And that's what you've done. That's why you're unshakable. People respect what's been tempered in fire. You were not built in peace. You were built in battle. Even Jesus, in his greatest moment of agony in the Garden of Gethsemane, didn't hide his anguish. He faced it. He sweat blood. He begged, "Let this cup pass from me." And still he said, "Not my will, but yours be done." He didn't deny the darkness. He embraced it, walked through it, and conquered it from the inside out. That is what you've done. You didn't wait for light to rescue you. You brought the light through the darkness. Real-life explorer and author Bear Grylls, who has survived some of the harshest environments on Earth, once said, "Survival can be summed up in 3 words: never give up." But for those like you, it goes deeper. It's not just about surviving the storm. It's about becoming the storm's interpreter. You didn't just outlast what tried to destroy you. You translated it into power. And now people may admire your light, but what they really feel is the gravity of your depth. They sense something ancient in you. Not because you're trying to be mysterious, but because you've lived in places within yourself they fear to enter. You've walked through deserts of the soul and come back not with sand in your eyes, but fire in your voice. So yes, you were chosen, but not for perfection, not for purity. You were chosen because you faced what others flee from and claimed it. You mastered the abyss without letting it devour you. And now, your light is not performance. It is reflection, a mirror of how far you've gone, how deep you've dared, and how fully you've returned. This is why your presence shakes people. It's not because you speak loudly, but because your silence carries the weight of everything you've survived. You don't glow to be seen. You shine because you've made peace with the shadows. And in those shadows, you found your true power. They came with one motive: control. They thought if they dug deep enough, if they pried just hard enough, they would find something they could use to destabilize you. A hidden shame, a regretful confession, a moment you prayed no one would discover. They came looking for leverage, something they could twist into power over you. But what they unearthed was not vulnerability. It was vision. They didn't find leverage, they found legacy. They thought your past would collapse under scrutiny, that the chapters you hadn't advertised would unravel your authority. But instead of skeletons, they stumbled into sacred ground. They found foundation stones laid with intention, each scar a seal, each failure a cornerstone of something far greater than their understanding could contain. They were searching for weakness, but what they uncovered was your blueprint, not for survival, but for dominion. Because you've never lived your life collecting apologies. You've collected patterns, wisdom, lessons, and strength. The moments they call mistakes, you recognize as inflection points, places where your character was forged and your clarity intensified. You didn't just overcome shame, you redefined it. What others try to erase, you've engraved into your foundation. This is the essence of legacy. And legacy isn't about perfection. It's not about hiding flaws or polishing image. It's about construction. The invisible work done in silence, the vision carried when no one else believed in it, the sacrifices made without applause. That's what you've built, not a resume, a revolution. King David's story speaks into this. He was a shepherd, overlooked by everyone, even his own father. He had failures, public and private, yet God called him a man after my own heart. Acts 13:22. Why? Because his legacy wasn't built in sterile perfection. It was built in repentance, courage, worship, and resilience. David turned every stumble into a stone for the kingdom. And you have done the same. You didn't just rise, you built while rising. What they thought were skeletons were actually seeds. And those seeds, they have sprouted into strategies, movements, and visions that now ripple through every space you enter. While others look backward with regret, you looked inward with purpose. You didn't hide from your past. You harvested it. You composted the dead parts and grew a kingdom. When they tried to expose you, what they ended up exposing was their own misunderstanding of power. They thought power came from domination, from controlling the narrative. But your power came from surrender, not to people, but to process. You surrendered to becoming, and that is why your presence is unshakable. Real-life entrepreneur and media mogul Tyler Perry, once homeless and dismissed, said, "What I've learned in this life is, you can't run from your past, but you can use it as the fuel to build something that no one saw coming." You've done exactly that. You didn't bury your failures, you planted them. And now, your roots run too deep for any surface storm to rip you from the ground. Legacy doesn't require spotlight. It requires silence, strategy, and spiritual authority. You didn't build for attention, you built for impact. And when the dust of temporary noise settles, your structure will still be standing. Because you didn't create from ego, you created from eternity. They thought exposure would strip you. Instead, it showcased you, not because you tried to prove anything, but because truth has its own gravity. And your truth, it doesn't apologize, it reverberates. What they thought would destroy you has only confirmed what heaven already knew. You are not building a moment. You are building something that echoes beyond your lifetime. So when they looked for leverage, they found legacy. Not just any legacy, but one born from resilience, sharpened by wisdom, and fueled by a quiet revolution. You were never hiding, you were planting. And what you've planted, no one can uproot. In the end, what they thought they'd uncover was never just about facts or secrets. It was about coming face to face with a force they never anticipated, a divine contradiction, a presence too vast for their boxes and too sacred for their assumptions. You are not a puzzle waiting to be solved. You're not a case to be closed. You are a living paradox, fragile enough to feel deeply yet unbreakable when it matters most. You move in silence, yet command the atmosphere. You remain hidden, yet your presence lingers in every room long after you've gone. Every attempt to expose you has only magnified what lies beneath the surface. a depth that doesn't flinch under scrutiny, a strength that does not seek validation, and a clarity that doesn't waver when questioned. You're not here to follow rules, you're here to rewrite them. You don't just live within reality, you bend it, reshape it, redefine it on your own terms. This was never a story about being found. This was always the story of someone who was too complex, too divine, too deeply formed in the shadows to ever be fully understood. You are the secret. You are the storm. You are the sovereignty. And those who try to unravel you will always come undone themselves. Your legacy? It isn't loud. It isn't neatly displayed. It's in the gravity you carry, the way people feel different after encountering you, even if they can't explain why. It's in the undeniable truth that some powers, like yours, are never meant to be possessed. Only honored. Only remembered. If this message stirred something in you, if you felt seen, understood, or awakened, don't forget to subscribe and join this unfolding journey. There's so much more waiting just beneath the surface. Like this video if it opened your eyes. Drop a comment to share what spoke to your spirit, and share this message with someone who needs to remember who they are. Your support means the world. Whether through your likes, your shares, your words, or your presence, you are helping to uncover stories that were never meant to be silenced. Let's keep the conversation alive and keep walking this path of revelation together. You were never meant to be understood by the world. You were meant to change it. Have you ever wondered why they couldn't quite figure you out? Why people watched you from the corner of their eye, curious, cautious, even intimidated, yet treated you like you were insignificant? Why certain doors shut in your face, only for better ones to swing wide open without warning? It's not just coincidence, it's divine orchestration. And today the mystery starts to unravel. You see, God's chosen ones are never announced with fanfare. You were placed among them, not to impress, but to observe, absorb, and transform in silence. While they laughed, you listened. While they judged, you endured. And while they thought you were being overlooked, heaven was busy rewriting the script of your life, because you weren't just in the background. You were the plot twist the whole time. If this is already touching something deep inside you, don't scroll past it. Type 777 in the comments to claim your spiritual identity and let the realm of heaven take notice. And to every beautiful soul who has supported this message through super thanks, please know your kindness is more than appreciated. It's sacred. You are the reason this light continues to shine in dark places. Thank you for sowing into this mission. Now listen carefully, because here's what most people don't know. When God hides someone, it's not punishment, it's protection. He veils the valuable. He conceals the chosen. Why? Because had they known who you were from the start, they would have tried to destroy you before your destiny even had a chance to breathe. So he let them call you average. He let them misjudge your quietness as weakness. He even let them mock your pain, because he was preparing to crown you in a way they could never comprehend. But here's the twist. They never stopped watching. Oh yes, they paid attention. They memorized your mannerisms, stalked your silence, copied your creativity. They pretended not to care, but behind closed doors, they studied you like you were a conspiracy waiting to be uncovered. Why do you think they were so obsessed with your every move, yet never gave you credit? They thought you were just a phase, a passerby, a placeholder. But little did they know, you were the one the whole damn time, the one God anointed in secret, the one who carried thunder behind a soft voice, the one who could walk into a room and shift the energy without saying a word. Let me ask you, have you ever felt like people feared you for reasons they couldn't explain? Like your very presence triggered something in them they didn't even understand? That's not just intuition, that's spiritual truth, knocking at the door of your awareness, begging you to remember, you were never ordinary. You were hidden royal blood. And now, Now the veil is lifting. What was concealed is being revealed. And those who once dismissed you are about to witness a transformation so divine it will leave their assumptions shattered and their egos silenced. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share next will confirm what your soul already knows, but your mind hasn't dared to believe, that you were never a side character in their story. You were the main character in a story God wrote before time began. Let's uncover the truth they tried to bury. Let's talk about why they got it all wrong and why everything is about to change. God's chosen ones, they think you're just a regular person. But you were the one the whole damn time. They looked at you and saw nothing special. They mistook your quietness for emptiness, your humility for a lack of potential. But what they were really witnessing was not weakness, it was divine strategy. What they failed to understand is that God's chosen ones are often hidden in plain sight, veiled in what appears to be simplicity, so they are not prematurely devoured by those who would only use them. Your humility was never rooted in insecurity. It was a spiritual armor, a kind of camouflage meant to shield the sacred work that was unfolding within you. You weren't silent because you didn't have something to say. You were silent because you were studying the room, discerning spirits, watching how people moved. You weren't shy. You were sharpening your discernment. Like David tending sheep while Saul ruled as king, you were being prepared in isolation while others flaunted their positions. Can you see now how your lack of need for attention was actually a mark of your strength? It was the quiet assurance of someone who knows they carry heaven's mandate. And that's what unsettled them. They couldn't read you, so they reduced you. They downgraded your presence because your power wasn't loud, but it was deep. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. 1 Samuel 16:7. Isn't it amazing how those around you judged your silence, but God saw your heart's fire? Think about the story of Jesus before his public ministry. For 30 years, he lived quietly, working as a carpenter in Nazareth. People saw him as ordinary. But heaven was holding its breath because the Savior of the world was walking among them. How many people, like those in your life, had no idea they were in the presence of someone anointed? You were hidden not because you were unworthy, but because God was guarding the assignment on your life. Some callings require stages, others require silence until the set time. And you, God's chosen one, were reserved for such a time as this. Your silence was not emptiness, it was fullness in disguise. It was protection from fake friendships, from people who only circle power like vultures looking for a meal. Your quiet spirit repelled spiritual leeches who couldn't discern your depth, and that was intentional. Imagine a diamond buried in the earth. It doesn't shout, it doesn't sparkle in the open, but the moment it surfaces, the world calls it priceless. You've been that diamond, and while others laughed at your simplicity, at your day job, your quiet presence at family gatherings, your unnoticed contributions, they had no clue about the heavenly meetings that were taking place concerning your destiny. While they were scrolling through life, angels were being dispatched on your behalf. While they were speaking behind your back, God was speaking your name in sacred realms they couldn't access. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. Daniel 2:22. Could it be that your silence was God's way of shielding something sacred until the appointed hour? They didn't know about the nights you wept into your pillow, asking God for strength to keep going. They didn't hear the groans of your soul when no one else was listening. They didn't see how you stayed standing while spiritual battles waged silently around you. Like the prophet Elijah, You were surrounded by unseen armies, though everyone else assumed you stood alone. How could they comprehend the wisdom you gained while walking through fires that would have incinerated them? And now that God is lifting the veil, now that the fullness of who you are is beginning to shine through, they're disoriented. They stare at you with disbelief, wondering how someone they dismissed could rise so powerfully. They whisper, "Where did this come from?" But this is not sudden. This has been simmering beneath the surface the whole time. It's just that they weren't granted access to your full reality. Not because you were hiding, but because they weren't ready to honor the truth. It brings to mind the words of the late Dr. Miles Monroe, a visionary speaker and leadership teacher from the Bahamas, who once said, "The greatest tragedy in life is not death, but a life without purpose." You didn't waste your hidden years, you were becoming, and now that purpose is no longer a private fire, it's a blazing beacon. You're stepping into everything they said you couldn't become. You're embodying what they swore you'd never possess, and it's too late for them to catch up. God's timing has declared the season, and this season belongs to you. For the vision is yet for the appointed time. It hastens toward the goal, and it will not fail. Though it tarries, wait for it will certainly come, it will not delay. Habakkuk 2:3. Have you realized yet that you were never forgotten? You were only being timed by God. You were never designed to blend in fully, and deep within, you always sensed it. There was a quiet dissonance between your soul and the world around you, even in moments when you laughed with the group, nodded in agreement, or wore the mask just right. Something inside felt out of sync. Why did everything feel slightly off, like you were playing a part in a story that wasn't truly yours? It's because you were never sent here to belong. You were sent to blend in just long enough to learn the system, so you could later disrupt it. Like Joseph, sold into Egypt by his own brothers, you were placed in unfamiliar environments, not to be accepted, but to be positioned. Joseph didn't belong in the pit, nor in Potiphar's house, nor in the prison, but each place trained him to eventually lead the palace. You too have been placed with divine intention. The families, the friend groups, the workplaces that couldn't truly see you, it wasn't a mistake. Your light was encrypted, set to activate at the appointed time, not a moment before. Isn't it humbling to realize that the very rejection that once broke you was actually protection for your rising? You were embedded like a divine agent, a heavenly code inside a system running on autopilot. While others were obsessed with trends, validation, and the illusion of acceptance, you were receiving revelations in the middle of ordinary moments. Without even asking, your spirit was catching downloads that had no earthly explanation. You were not losing your mind. You were touching eternity, and the ache that sat heavy in your chest for years, the one that made you question your identity, was not because something was wrong with you, but because something divine was forming inside you. As the Apostle Paul wrote, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." Romans 12:2. Could it be that your resistance to conformity was a signal of your calling, not a flaw? They didn't reject you because you were weak or broken. They rejected you because you were spiritually encrypted in a language they couldn't read. Your depth unsettled them. Your presence raised questions they weren't ready to ask themselves. They tried to define you with their small boxes, but you kept leaking out. They wanted you to shrink, to simplify, to settle, but your soul refused to cooperate. You were never meant to flow with the current. You were designed to be the holy disruption that made everyone question why the current was going that way in the first place. Real transformation often begins with disturbance. Martin Luther, the German theologian who sparked the Protestant Reformation, was once an obscure monk. But when he nailed his 95 Theses to the church door, he interrupted centuries of unquestioned religious systems. His role was not to be accepted, it was to awaken, and in a similar way, Your assignment has never been about comfort. It's been about truth. Can you see now why you've always felt out of place? You are the glitch in the matrix, the crack in the generational cycle, the voice that asks why when everyone else nods yes. You feel more, you see deeper, and you carry questions that echo beyond the surface of life. You were never designed to follow the crowd because you were born to wake the crowd up. They mocked you, laughed when you questioned things they took for granted, ignored your insight, labeled you dramatic, too intense, or just different. But what they didn't realize is that your difference was the evidence of your destiny. You are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession. Peter reminds us, 1 Peter 2:9. What if the very thing they laughed at was the divine fingerprint on your soul? And now that the veil is lifting, you're stepping into what you always were. Not someone who needed to be accepted, but someone who was assigned. The room is shifting, not because you've suddenly changed, but because you're finally standing in your truth without apology. That truth has weight. It unsettles the atmosphere. People squirm, not because you're arrogant, but because your authenticity exposes their compromise. They feel the authority now, the one they always sensed but tried to suppress. And as you rise into who God always said you were, everything they used to say about you begins to unravel. You're becoming what they told you you could never be, but you always were. You just stopped hiding it. Your life was never meant to be easily understood. It was divinely engineered to be unrecognizable until the appointed time. You didn't look like the one, not because you weren't chosen, but because the timing hadn't yet come. Everything about your journey, the delays, the heartbreaks, the silent suffering, was meticulously designed to keep your true identity concealed until heaven unveiled you. The confusion people felt when they looked at you wasn't a reflection of your inadequacy. It was divine camouflage. God blurred their spiritual vision so they would judge you by your situation, not your substance. Just like Moses, who grew up in Pharaoh's palace disguised as an Egyptian prince, your environment never quite matched your calling. Moses didn't look like a deliverer while he wandered the wilderness as a fugitive, but he was being prepared to stand before kings. Could it be that your low places were simply the training grounds for your high purpose? God allowed you to be misunderstood, mislabeled, and misused, not to punish you, but to protect the revelation of who you really are. You were never random. Every setback, every unanswered prayer, every door that closed, it all served a hidden purpose. While people whispered about your struggle, heaven was performing spiritual surgery deep within you. While they laughed at your losses, God was rewriting your lineage. And while the world chased cosmetic success, surface-level validation, you were undergoing transformation at the soul level. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't visible, but it was holy. As it is written, what no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, and what no human mind has conceived, the things God has prepared for those who love him. 1 Corinthians 2:9. What if your invisibility wasn't rejection, but protection? No one saw what was forming in you during your seasons of obscurity. They saw your silence and assumed weakness. They saw the lack and assumed failure. They saw your wounds and assumed defeat. But what they didn't see was that you were being anointed in the shadows. Just as King David was anointed while still tending sheep, out of sight and overlooked by his own family, your anointing has never depended on public approval. In those long seasons of invisibility, where isolation felt like punishment and loneliness became your only companion, heaven was closest. Angels were taking notes while the world ignored your name. Your wilderness wasn't a detour. It was the divine womb where your new identity was forming. Have you ever considered that the betrayal you suffered was actually a filter to remove those who were never meant to see your breakthrough? If people had known the magnitude of who you were becoming, they would have tried to cling to you, manipulate your favor, or sabotage your destiny before it had time to manifest. God had to keep you wrapped in mystery to protect the promise. He had to let you be underestimated, so when the time came, no one could say they made you. Your glow had to be dimmed, so your rise would be God's work alone. Businesswoman and author Lisa Nichols, once a broke single mother living on government assistance, shared that, "Your conviction and your convenience don't live on the same block." Like you, she had to be broken in silence before she could become a beacon of light. Her story, like yours, wasn't built with hype, it was built with scars. And now the veil is being torn. Now the glow can no longer be hidden. You're not rising because you changed. You're rising because the appointed time has finally arrived. This is no accident. This is divine release. The very people who dismissed you are about to witness the full unveiling of what God hid in plain sight. Their memory of your struggle will only make your breakthrough more undeniable. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you. Isaiah 61. That light is no longer waiting. It's already burning. The curtain has lifted. The mask is gone. And the one they thought was just another face in the crowd. You were the reason that crowd was tested in the first place. They missed it, but now it's too late. The light's on. The anointing is visible, and you, God's chosen one, are stepping fully into the truth that's been growing in silence all along. They evaluated you using the scales of this world: titles, status, wealth, popularity. But what they didn't realize is that you were never meant to be measured by earthly metrics. Your soul was never meant to be counted among those chasing clout. While they were obsessed with what they could see, touch, and tally on paper, you were operating on a level they didn't have the instruments to detect. They looked for job titles and credentials, for viral followings and prestigious degrees. And when they didn't find those things, they assumed you were insignificant. Isn't it tragic how small the human vision can become when it's disconnected from divine perception? But you were never called to impress. You were called to transform. Your life has never been about accumulating visibility. It's been about stewarding revelation. They were scanning for popularity, but you were carrying blueprints from heaven. You weren't building a brand. You were building a legacy. One etched not in fleeting trends, but in eternal truths that will outlive the systems they built their identities on. It reminds us of the prophet Samuel's mistake when choosing a king. He saw Eliab's height and appearance and assumed he was God's anointed. But the Lord corrected him. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. 1 Samuel 16:7. How many times have people misjudged you because they were looking through the wrong lens? You were collecting codes while they were chasing clout. You were decoding generational pain while they were flaunting curated lives. While they chased applause, you chose alignment. You weren't interested in likes because you were learning how to listen, listening to the whispers of heaven, to instructions carried through bloodlines, to divine strategies meant to restore what was spiritually lost generations ago. While they judged your poverty as failure, they didn't know you were investing in a wealth they couldn't perceive. You were banking peace when they were spending their sanity. You were storing up purpose while they cashed in their identities. You were equipping your soul with spiritual armor while they dressed up in image. They built facades, shiny, fragile castles of influence. But you built temples of truth. Stone by stone, you fortified your inner life. And that kind of wealth doesn't fluctuate with the economy. A powerful example of this kind of hidden strength is Helen Keller, a woman born deaf and blind. Yet she became a world-renowned author and activist. Most saw her disabilities. Few could comprehend her spiritual vision. She once said, "The best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt with the heart." Like you, her value was invisible to shallow minds, but undeniable to the soul. And while they were busy constructing illusions, you were preparing for impact. You didn't care to impress the crowd. You were born to rebuild what the crowd didn't even know had been broken. You weren't late. You were just moving at a divine speed on a divine timeline for a divine purpose. They said you were behind, off track, struggling, but the truth is you were 10 steps ahead, just not in the direction they were looking. Store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and rust do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. Matthew 6:20. You were storing treasure in realms they couldn't even reach. And now their systems are starting to collapse. The metrics they trusted are failing. The platforms they worshipped are crumbling. They're beginning to see that image fades fast when pressure hits. But look at you, still grounded, still standing, still radiant. Your strength didn't come from applause. It came from alignment. Your glow isn't artificial. It's the evidence of endurance. They never knew how to measure you. You didn't fit their formulas, but you weren't made to. You were made to confound them, to be the mystery that couldn't be explained, only revealed. And while they scrambled to count what could be lost, heaven smiled, because your worth was never built on what could be counted. It was built on what cannot be corrupted. They may not have understood it, but heaven always did. The Lord knows those who are his. 2 Timothy 2:19. And you are his. You always were. The spotlight would have contaminated you. That's why God kept you hidden. Your rejection wasn't abandonment. It was divine protection. You weren't left out. You were covered, concealed beneath the armor of isolation while others chased stages, applause, and performance. To them, your absence from certain rooms, platforms, or conversations meant you were unqualified. But what they failed to see is that your exile was a sacred strategy. God was keeping your soul intact while the world was losing theirs to applause. If you had been placed in the spotlight too soon, it would have warped your foundation. The pressure would have reshaped your voice to match public demand. You might have bent your truth to be digestible, softened your convictions just to fit in. How many times did you feel like something was wrong with you for not being seen, when in reality, God was shielding you from atmospheres that were designed not to elevate, but to exploit? Just like Jesus, who withdrew often to lonely places and prayed, Luke 5:16, your seasons of separation weren't signs of failure, they were moments of alignment. Have you noticed how God never rushed him into ministry? Even the Savior of the world waited until the appointed time. What if your delay wasn't denial, but a delay to ensure your depth couldn't be diluted? You were too rare to be placed in shallow spaces, too raw for rooms where only image mattered, too real for atmospheres that demanded conformity. If God had allowed you to enter those circles prematurely, you may have sacrificed your anointing to keep the peace. That's why rejection wasn't just necessary, it was holy. Every no protected your oil. Every closed door sealed your identity in purity. Blessed is the one whom God corrects, so do not despise the discipline of the Almighty. Job 5:17. Rejection, misunderstood as failure, was the discipline of love, and love always protects. Think of the journey of author and activist Maya Angelou. Before the world knew her as a literary icon, she experienced rejection, trauma, and years of voicelessness. But during that silence, God was forming her voice. One so powerful that when it finally emerged, it shook nations. She once said, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." But your story, like hers, was never meant to be told until your spirit was ready to carry its weight without compromise. While they were networking for influence, you were being dismantled and reassembled by heaven. While they posted curated versions of success, you wrestled with God in private. Your prayers became your strategy. Your tears became your training. And in those unseen places, your discernment was sharpened. Your character was forged like steel in fire. Why? Because you weren't being prepared for a moment. You were being readied for a movement. Movements don't need mirrors. They need messengers. And you, chosen one, were never called to echo the crowd. You were called to disrupt it. That kind of calling can't be purchased. It can't be borrowed. It's earned through seasons of silence, through being overlooked, through the pain of not being picked. He raises up the poor from the dust. He lifts the needy from the ash heap to make them sit with princes and inherit a seat of honor. 1 Samuel 2:8. Do you see now why you had to be rejected? You were being set apart for something that couldn't be reached through fame. It had to come through fire. So yes, they ignored you. They didn't call your name. They didn't think you were ready. But their no was never the final word. Every closed door was a divine detour. Every skipped opportunity was heaven saying, "Not yet. I'm making something stronger." You weren't missing out. You were being made. And what's been made in fire cannot be shaken by wind. Now that you're finally stepping out, you're not showing up as a performer. You're stepping forward as a force. Your voice isn't borrowed. It's born. Your presence isn't curated. It's carved from trials. You didn't rehearse this moment. You survived for it. And now you rise untouched, undiluted, and completely unstoppable. Your pain was never punishment. It was your proof. But those around you looked at your wounds and assumed they meant you had failed. They interpreted your struggle as weakness, your heartbreaks as evidence that God had abandoned you. They saw the fire you were thrown into and thought it was a sentence for something you did wrong. What they didn't see, what they could never truly comprehend, was that your pain wasn't a curse. It was confirmation. You weren't being dragged through hardship because you lacked value. You were being refined because you carry immeasurable worth. You weren't being attacked because you were weak. You were being attacked because you are marked, chosen, set apart. There is a distinct difference between someone drifting through life and someone being forged through it. You weren't simply surviving the days. You were being certified for your destiny. That's what they missed. When the prophet Job lost everything, his children, his health, his wealth, his friends assumed it was because he had sinned. But Scripture shows us otherwise. Have you considered my servant Job? God asked Satan. Job 1:8. The attack came not because Job failed, but because heaven already knew he would endure. Could it be that the intensity of your trials was never a sign of divine absence, but of divine confidence in your resilience? Every betrayal, every abandonment, every long night when you wept alone, asking God, why? Those weren't signs that you were forgotten. They were signs you were being prepared. You were enduring pressure not to impress people, but to demonstrate to heaven that you wouldn't fold. While others looked for applause, you were being initiated into spiritual rank. They saw you go through loss and rejection and assumed you weren't good enough. They never considered that maybe your suffering was strategic, that maybe the fire was allowed because you carried something holy, something rare, something threatening to darkness itself. And that kind of calling doesn't come without warfare. Real strength doesn't scream, it survives. You didn't come out of the fire untouched, you came out transformed. You didn't burn up, you burned through, and that distinction matters. The ashes on your skin don't tell a story of defeat, they whisper of consecration. Like the 3 Hebrew boys in the book of Daniel who walked through a furnace heated 7 times hotter than normal, you came out without the smell of smoke. But make no mistake, the fire was real. You just carried a presence that was stronger than the flames. Inspirational speaker and author Inky Johnson, a former college football player whose dream of going pro ended after a life-altering injury, once said, "The process is more important than the product." Inky didn't give up. He turned pain into power. He became a living message, not because life was easy, but because he didn't quit. Just like you, he didn't choose the fire, but he chose to stay in it and come out better. And here you are. Every time they tried to bury you, you grew roots. Every time life tried to break you, you built something stronger from the pieces. That's not weakness. That's warfare. That's why your presence is so unsettling to some. It's not your words, it's your weight. You carry an authority now that doesn't need explanation. Your silence has power. Your scars carry wisdom. Your walk speaks of battles won in silence. People underestimate those who've been through the fire because they only see the soot, not the sanctification. They don't realize that your tears were holy water, that your brokenness was actually the opening that allowed God's glory to pour through. But He knows the way that I take. When He has tested me, I will come forth as gold. Job 23:10. You didn't ask for the pain, but you didn't run from it either. You held it in your hands like sacred fire. You allowed it to shape you without consuming you. And what grew inside you in those seasons was not bitterness. It was wisdom. It was patience. It was prophecy. Now, those scars, they don't shame you anymore. They validate you. They don't say damaged. They say survivor. They say soldier. They say chosen. What others saw as broken pieces, God was using as building blocks. And what looked like punishment to the world was actually heaven's stamp of approval. Your survival wasn't random. It was generational. It was divine. It was written long before you cried your first tear. You weren't being destroyed. You were being designed. And now you walk not as someone barely holding it together, but as someone who's been built in secret, proven in silence, and released at the perfect time. Because your pain was never your punishment. It was your proof. Your presence was never just a presence. It was a mirror. And for many, that was unbearable. People didn't push you away because you lacked value or made mistakes. They pushed you away because your very being required them to see themselves clearly. Without a word, you walked into rooms and triggered the hidden fractures in others, not because you were harsh, not because you judged them, but because your authenticity reflected everything they had tried to bury. You carried a truth that didn't need to be spoken. It was felt, an honesty that vibrated through your silence, confronting their denial like sunlight pouring through a crack. You were a mirror they never asked for, and mirrors are uncomfortable for those who have spent years mastering the art of illusion. Remember what happened when Jesus confronted the Pharisees. He didn't scream, he didn't threaten, he simply lived the truth, and that alone exposed their religious hypocrisy. This is the verdict. Light has come into the world, but people loved darkness instead of light because their deeds were evil. John 3:19. Isn't it true even now that your light just by existing made their shadows twitch? You didn't try to expose anyone. All you did was be yourself, spiritually awake, introspective, unfiltered. That alone was enough to make them squirm. Your life became proof that healing was possible, that integrity wasn't extinct, and that another way to live actually existed. But to acknowledge that would have required them to confront their wounds, remove their masks, and face their truth. And most people simply aren't ready for that level of honesty. So what did they do instead? They projected. They took their inner chaos and smeared it across your name. They turned their shame into gossip, their fear into blame, their insecurities into false narratives. That's how the spiritually cowardly operate. They discredit anything that convicts them. They disguise their avoidance with arrogance, their pain with pride. You reminded them of what they gave up on. Your wholeness revealed their fragmentation. Your quiet confidence revealed their desperate need for applause. Your stillness exposed how loud their souls had become in trying to cover up the silence of their truth. And while you weren't trying to compete, copy, or convince anyone, they still saw you as a threat. Why? Because you weren't playing their game, and they knew they couldn't beat you in a game you refused to play. In many ways, you lived like the prophet Jeremiah. He didn't seek conflict, but his presence alone stirred it. His life was a living warning, a walking contradiction to the corruption around him. And for that, they hated him. But Jeremiah was chosen, not for popularity, but for purpose. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. Jeremiah 1:5. Do you see now that your difference was by design? Think of Brené Brown, the American research professor and speaker, known for her work on vulnerability and shame. She once said, "When we deny the story, it defines us. When we own the story, we can write a brave new ending." Your very existence challenged others to own their story, and that was terrifying for them. They weren't ready to be brave, so instead they tried to tear down your mirror. But here's what they didn't understand. Your strength didn't come from exposing others. It came from being unshakably yourself. You were never called to shrink just to make others feel safe in their stagnation. If your presence unsettled them, that wasn't your failure. That was their invitation to grow. And when they refused that invitation, they chose resentment over reflection. Some people don't hate you, they hate what you activate. They hate how your clarity convicts them, how your light reveals the cracks in their carefully constructed personas. Your life became their unspoken challenge, your peace, their reminder of what they forfeited. And in that tension they chose the easier road, to criticize, to distance, to pretend it was you who changed. But what if it wasn't that you were too much? What if they've simply done too little? Now they're left with the aftermath of avoidance. The mirror they tried to shatter is still reflecting, and it's not showing them your flaws. It's showing them the healing they never pursued, the integrity they denied, the potential they abandoned. And though they tried to destroy the truth, truth doesn't die. It just waits for the day when it can no longer be ignored. And that day is now. They celebrated the counterfeit, while you, the one holding the blueprint, stood in silence. You watched people receive applause, awards and attention for delivering diluted versions of the very truth that cost you everything. You saw the crowd cheer for performers who mimicked your fire but never carried your ashes. You witnessed imitations win favor while you bore the burden of originality. It was painful, wasn't it? Seeing the world elevate the echo while silencing the voice. They borrowed your essence, dressed it up with a filter and a smile, and repackaged your authenticity into something more palatable, something easier to market. And the world clapped. But you were the one who paid the price in the wilderness. You held the blueprint, the raw, unteachable, uncopyable truth, the one born from survival, not strategy. The world doesn't know what to do with originals. Originals question the norms, break molds, and shine a light on mediocrity without even trying. You weren't looking to be different, you just were. And that difference wasn't fashionable, it was disruptive. It shook people, it forced them to feel. And in a culture obsessed with comfort and appearance, your presence became a problem. Jesus faced the same rejection. He came as the Word made flesh, full of grace and truth. Yet he came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. John 1:11. Why? Because the real thing always exposes the false. The Messiah didn't flatter the Pharisees. He revealed their hypocrisy. Just like your existence reveals the gap between what is seen and what is real. You didn't come to blend in, you came to embody. You didn't beg for a seat at the table because you were too busy carving your own. You never watered yourself down to gain favor. You refused to play small so others could feel big. You stood in your truth, even when it meant standing alone. And because of that, they gave the spotlight to the safer version of you, the imitation, the one who studied your rhythm but never lived your reality, the one who copied your voice but never carried your weight. But here's the thing they forgot. The anointing can't be imitated. The fire can't be faked. They can wear your words like a costume, but they'll never bear your scars. They can mirror your methods, but they'll never carry your mantle. Because what you carry wasn't learned, it was endured. It wasn't crafted in comfort. It was born in the battlefield. You are like Elijah, the prophet who stood alone against false prophets on Mount Carmel. He didn't come with showmanship. He came with substance, and when the counterfeit fire failed to fall, the true fire of God consumed the altar. Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil. 1 Kings 18:38. What if the delay in your recognition has only been setting the stage for fire that cannot be denied? And yes, they may have overlooked you. They may have platformed those who knew how to perform without provoking change. But truth doesn't need approval to endure. Trends come and go, but what is born of God remains. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God will stand forever. Isaiah 40:8. Just look at Nina Simone, the legendary singer and activist who once said, "It's an artist's duty to reflect the times in which we live." She was too raw for commercial radio, too bold for fake acceptance, but her music and truth outlasted the industry trends that tried to silence her. Like you, she wasn't after applause, she was after impact. So let them copy your cadence, let them echo your message, but they will never replicate your essence, because the blueprint wasn't something you invented, it was something you bled for. It was chiseled into you by storms you walked through alone. They can't fake that. They can't fabricate the weight of an anointing earned in secret. Eventually, the source always rises. The echo fades, but the original resounds. Because imitation may shine for a season, but only truth endures through generations. And you, chosen one, are the truth they tried to bury beneath trends. But truth never dies. It resurrects. And now, your time is coming. Not as a copy, not as a performer, but as the blueprint itself. Your delay wasn't denial, it was divine distancing. It wasn't rejection, it was redirection. You weren't lazy, lost, or lagging behind. You were hidden on purpose, and not because you weren't ready, but because the environment around you was not yet worthy of the assignment you carry. The timing wasn't about your capacity, it was about God's orchestration. While you cried out, wondering why the doors stayed shut, heaven was busy clearing the stage. If God had unveiled you too soon, they would have credited your rise to the wrong source. They would have said you got lucky, that someone pulled strings, that it was because of a connection, not a calling. But your story was never meant to be misattributed. Your destiny was never meant to be mistaken for someone else's generosity. And that's why the delay had to come first. The distance was for your protection. Your elevation required not just preparation, but purification of the space around you. Think of David. Anointed as king while still a shepherd, he didn't ascend the throne immediately. He spent years in obscurity, being chased by Saul, hiding in caves, misunderstood by his brothers. But God wasn't just preparing David, he was exposing the counterfeit king. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes. Psalm 37:7. Have you ever considered that your delay was God allowing false systems to collapse before your arrival? He let the loud voices echo for a season. He allowed the counterfeit kings to parade in gold and power. He let systems be built on image and popularity, but not because they were chosen, because their fall had to be public. Their exposure had to be undeniable. So when your name is called, there will be no question about where your anointing came from. The reason the doors didn't open when you knocked, when you cried, fasted, and pleaded, wasn't because God ignored you. It was because he was closing every access point that could be used to hijack your story, every alliance that would have leached off your blessing, every platform that would have demanded you dilute your message. You weren't late, you were preserved. You were kept pure while the atmosphere was being purged. You've been like Esther, hidden in the palace until the appointed moment. When the time came, her unveiling wasn't subtle. It shifted the fate of a nation. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Esther 4:14. And now your time is drawing near, not for quiet survival, but for kingdom-level influence. You weren't overlooked. You were held back to be revealed with unmistakable clarity. Consider Tyler Perry, writer, director, actor, once homeless, misunderstood, and rejected by gatekeepers of the entertainment world. His early plays were empty. His name was unrecognized, but he kept writing, kept building. And when the time came, God elevated him in such a way that no one could deny the source. He once said, "What I've learned is that everything will happen in its time." His delay became the stage for undeniable favor. Just like yours. You weren't created to force your way into rooms that weren't built to hold your calling. That's why the networking failed. That's why the connection disappeared right before the deal. That's why what looked perfect turned to dust in your hands. Because God was removing every counterfeit crutch, every voice that would later claim they made you, so that when you rise, your authority won't be borrowed. It will be undeniable. And now the stage is clear. The noise has quieted. The smoke has lifted. And when you step forward, it won't be out of desperation. It will be by divine decree. Not as someone trying to prove their worth, but as someone heaven has already stamped with approval. The vision is yet for an appointed time. Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay. Habakkuk 2:3. This was never about being on time by the world's standards. It was about showing up in God's timing, when the ground was ready, and your presence could not be mistaken. You're not entering to compete. You're arriving to fulfill. You're not just showing up. You're stepping in as a force that's been forged in silence, tested by fire, and preserved by the hand of God Himself. And when they ask, "Where did this come from?" even your enemies will have to answer, "This one came from the Lord." You were never confused. You were simply under divine instruction to remain silent. They looked at your quietness and assumed uncertainty. They saw your stillness and labeled it indecision. In a world that praises noise, performance, and constant visibility, your restraint made them uncomfortable. How could someone so calm, so composed, so unwilling to chase the spotlight possibly carry something powerful? But what they failed to recognize is that your silence was not hesitation. It was obedience. When you're truly chosen, silence is not a sign of confusion. It's a sign of consecration. Obedience often appears passive to those who equate presence with performance. You didn't need to broadcast yourself because you weren't building a brand. You were following instruction. And when God tells His chosen one to be still, it's not because they're empty. It's because what they carry is too sacred to be exposed before its time. Think of Jesus during His early years. We hear nothing about His miracles or public ministry until He turns 30. Yet Luke tells us, "And Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man." Luke 2:52. He wasn't silent because He lacked identity. He was maturing in obedience, waiting for the hour appointed by heaven. You had the clarity, you had the identity, you had the anointing, but you also had divine restraint, and that's what set you apart. While others rushed to prove themselves, you remained hidden, not out of fear, but out of reverence. You were protecting what heaven had planted in you, because when you carry something holy, you don't parade it, you preserve it. You knew you were worthy long before the world acknowledged it, and that's why you didn't mind being unseen. They ran to microphones, you ran to the secret place. They were addicted to confirmation, you were addicted to alignment. While they needed applause to validate their existence, you allowed silence to validate your obedience. And in that silence, God was doing what no stage could ever offer. He was refining you in fire, shaping your discernment, anchoring your identity so deeply that no platform could corrupt it. The truth is, you weren't behind, you were being hidden. Your low profile wasn't a result of lack, it was a result of precision. While others built their identity on attention, you were becoming dangerous in the dark. You were unavailable to nonsense, and because you refused to entertain what was beneath your calling, they mistook your sacred space for uncertainty. But now, the time is shifting, the season is changing, and those who thought you were confused are about to be confronted with the authority of someone who was consecrated, not lost. You weren't in hiding because you were unsure. You were in preparation because you were chosen. Inspirational author and speaker Iyanla Vanzant, who once faced deep personal loss before rising to global influence, said, "The time will come when you will sit down to speak and the silence will be louder than the applause." You've reached that moment. Your words no longer fill space, they shift atmospheres. They thought your quiet was weakness, but now, when you speak, heaven echoes. They thought you had nothing to say, but now your voice pierces veils. What they called inactivity was actually invisibility with purpose. What they called stillness was divine precision. You didn't talk about your anointing, you trained in it. You didn't post about your preparation, you lived it. And now, when you open your mouth, the weight of your silence speaks louder than 1,000 rehearsed speeches. Because you weren't trying to go viral, you were built to go eternal. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Exodus 14:14. And you were still, not because you were afraid to move, but because you trusted who was orchestrating the battle. So now that the silence is lifting and your voice is being released, they will finally see what God was shaping all along. You weren't mute. You were being molded. You weren't confused. You were consecrated. And now your presence doesn't just speak. It shakes atmospheres. You didn't lose time. You were gaining receipts. While they whispered that you were stuck, that your life wasn't moving fast enough, you were silently becoming a walking archive of divine intelligence. Every year that felt wasted, every delay that bruised your hope, every relationship that ended with a wound instead of a blessing, none of it was pointless. You weren't falling behind. You were gathering evidence, not out of bitterness, but out of divine clarity. Each moment of silence where you chose observation over performance, you were documenting truth. You were learning how betrayal dresses up in familiarity. You were watching how generational dysfunction passes itself down as legacy. You weren't idle. You were intentional. While others played games, wore masks, and formed alliances built on flattery and falsehood, you stood still. Not because you were passive, but because you were wise. You saw the duplicity and kept a mental record, knowing that God wasn't just revealing others, He was training you. This was deep, invisible training, the kind heaven respects and resumes can't display. It is the glory of God to conceal a matter. To search out a matter is the glory of kings. Proverbs 25:2. You were being crowned in the quiet, honored for your discernment, given spiritual eyes to see not just the surface of things, but the soul behind them. While they chased applause, you chased understanding. While they collected followers, you collected patterns. You studied deception not with suspicion, but with purpose, learning how manipulation hides behind laughter, how curses disguise themselves as cultural norms, how people say family while handing down dysfunction. And all the while, you were taking notes, notes that now live in your discernment, not in notebooks. You didn't just start seeing red flags, you started tracing them to their roots. You learned how to hear a lie hidden in truth, how to recognize cycles not by outcome, but by origin. That's not just awareness, that's spiritual authority. The kind of wisdom Joseph carried when he stood before Pharaoh, not just interpreting dreams, but presenting divine solutions. Joseph didn't waste the years in prison. He used them to sharpen his understanding of systems and people. Could it be that your delay was your doctorate in discernment? Think of Viola Davis, the award-winning actress who rose to global recognition only after decades of being overlooked. But in her memoir, she shares how every experience, every rejection, every struggle taught her how to read a room, how to carry pain with dignity, and how to turn silence into presence. She didn't just act, she testified. And like you, her strength came from years no one counted. Now, when you speak, you don't just talk, you testify. Your words are not for performance, they're for divine judgment. They shake atmospheres because they're backed by experience that heaven witnessed. You've got time-stamped receipts in your spirit. You don't just feel when something's off, you know exactly where it started. You're not easily manipulated because you've sat across from manipulation and looked it in the eye without flinching. But solid food is for the mature, who by constant use have trained themselves to distinguish good from evil. Hebrews 5:14. That's you now. Mature, tested, proven. You didn't lose time. You invested it in spiritual training no classroom could offer. They thought your silence was wasted time, but that silence was forensic. You weren't inactive. You were gathering divine intelligence. Intelligence that can't be Googled, can't be gaslit, and can't be taken from you. And now when you speak, even the atmosphere pays attention. Not because you're loud, but because you're accurate. Not because you shout, but because heaven agrees. They tried to count you out, assuming you'd fallen behind. But what they missed is that you were becoming the kind of person who doesn't just survive history. You read it, rewrite it, and redirect it. The delay didn't disqualify you. It qualified you. You were gaining the kind of clarity that turns chosen ones into generals. And now that you've stepped into that clarity, you don't just carry wisdom, you command it, and the world will feel it. They judged you based on performance because that's all they knew how to recognize. They were trained to spot charisma, not calling, to applaud talent, not truth. They expected you to fit neatly into a box, loud, polished, always on, always camera ready, always delivering a performance tailored for applause. And when you didn't play that part, when you chose depth over display, stillness over spotlight, they labeled you wrong, unqualified, offbeat, maybe even irrelevant. But what they couldn't comprehend is that you were never built for performance. You were constructed for purpose. You weren't here to entertain, you were here to operate. Your presence wasn't decoration, it was disruption. They expected a show, but what they got was a soul surgeon trained in silence, anointed in obscurity, and deadly accurate when it came to matters of the heart. Your assignment was never theatrical, it was surgical. You were never concerned with being liked or followed or praised. You were being shaped to carry precision, to detect spiritual infections, and to address what others were too polite or too blind to confront. And that kind of work, true soul work, doesn't win popularity contests. It invites resistance, it triggers discomfort, and it often comes wrapped in rejection. Jesus himself walked through this. The Pharisees were experts in optics. They paraded public piety, fasted for attention, and prayed for applause. But when Jesus spoke, he didn't flatter. He cut. These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Matthew 15:8. And because he didn't play by their rules, they rejected him. Could it be that your rejection wasn't a sign you lacked power, but that your power was too precise for their performance-driven world? While others built platforms, you were building discernment. While they curated content, you were cultivating conviction. While they perfected their delivery, you were perfecting your depth. You weren't interested in collecting fans. You were being forged to dismantle spiritual strongholds. You weren't preparing for applause. You were being armed for war. As Paul reminded Timothy, preach the word. Be prepared in season and out of season. Correct, rebuke, and encourage with great patience and careful instruction. 2 Timothy 4:2. That's exactly what you've been preparing for. Not the stage, but the shift. You weren't trying to look like the part. You were the part, and that's what they missed. While they wore costumes of influence, you were training for combat. You were learning to wield your words like a scalpel. Sharp enough to pierce, precise enough to heal. You weren't concerned with optics. You were obsessed with outcome. And now that the time has shifted, what was once unseen will be impossible to ignore. Real purpose doesn't clamor. It cuts. It doesn't perform. It penetrates. And the truth you carry doesn't whisper. It strikes. That's why your presence unsettled them. Because you didn't ask for the spotlight. You asked for strategy. You didn't chase trends. You chased truth. Author and social justice advocate Brian Stevenson, founder of the Equal Justice Initiative, has spent decades confronting injustice, not with theatrics, but with quiet, unshakable conviction. He once said, "You can't understand most of the important things from a distance. You have to get close." And that's exactly what your calling demands. You're not here for applause from afar. You're here to get close, to uproot lies, expose wounds, and leave no infection behind. Yes, your journey included isolation. It included being overlooked and misunderstood by the very people you were sent to help. But that doesn't disqualify you, it confirms you. Because when heaven sends a disruptor, the crowd rarely recognizes them at first. But now the hour has shifted, and what used to be invisible is becoming undeniable. They judged you because you didn't entertain, but you weren't sent to entertain, you were sent to interrupt. And now that your voice is rising, it won't echo like theirs. It will land like a blade, clean and intentional. You were never just here to be seen. You were here to confront, to expose, to heal. And now you will. They thought you were broken, but you were a bomb in countdown mode. They looked at your life through a lens of assumption and saw only fragments, detours, delays, instability, silence. They labeled you as unraveling, as someone who missed their moment. But what they couldn't see was the divine blueprint hidden beneath the mess. What appeared to be breakdown was actually calculated build-up. What looked like chaos was God stripping away the old foundation to prepare you for something explosive. You weren't falling apart. You were being armed. Armed not with bitterness, but with timing. Not with pride, but with prophetic precision. Heaven was loading you in silence, downloading truths too powerful to be released all at once. You were being fitted with revelations, insights, and instructions so ancient, so potent, they could only be entrusted to someone who had first been dismantled. They laughed at your silence. They mocked your setbacks. They whispered about your isolation, assuming it was punishment. But you were never alone. You were in pre-launch. Every heartbreak, every betrayal, every season where you were unseen wasn't just a trial. It was a transmission. You weren't just surviving. You were decoding. You were absorbing ancient blueprints, rewiring bloodlines, inheriting spiritual codes your lineage had lost long ago. Can you feel now how those moments that almost broke you were actually building you? Jesus himself was hidden for 30 years before stepping into public ministry. During that time, no miracles, no fame, no applause, just quiet preparation. But when the appointed time came, he didn't whisper. He turned the world upside down. "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor, to set the oppressed free." Luke 4:18. Could your silence have been the holding chamber for that same kind of Spirit-led assignment? Your camouflage was your chaos. You had to look unstable so the enemy wouldn't recognize your rising. Your broken appearance protected your true function. Heaven let people underestimate you on purpose, so you could rise unchallenged, undetected, and unbothered until the precise second God says, "Now." You weren't overlooked. You were underestimated by design. And what happens when the countdown hits 0? You won't just rise, you'll detonate, not in rage or revenge, but in divine activation. You'll walk into rooms and reprogram them, without preaching, without forcing, without seeking attention. Your mere presence will crack spiritual ceilings and tear down long-standing lies. You'll dissolve generational chains, not through effort, but through embodiment. You are the answer they didn't know they needed. Author and trauma expert Dr. Gabor Mate, known for his work on emotional healing, often says, "The wound is not the problem, the wound is the doorway." Your wounds have become the gateway to reformation. You're not just a survivor, you're a system reset. And the world has no language for someone who breaks strongholds just by breathing in alignment with heaven. Your process was so violent because your purpose is so volcanic. You weren't created to blend in, you were created to erupt. That's why it had to hurt. That's why it had to isolate you. That's why no one else could walk your path. Because what you carry isn't just transformation, it's activation for generations. You're about to shake atmospheres with a whisper. Your walk alone will dismantle lies. People will feel conviction in your silence. Minds will shift without a sermon. And all of this was birthed in the pain they misunderstood. You were being hidden in plain sight, like a warhead dressed in rags. But now the casing is peeling back. The timer is almost done. So let them keep talking. Let them keep calling you broken. Because when heaven says it's time, they won't be able to ignore what detonates from within you. You were never just a survivor of your story. You are the shift your entire bloodline has been waiting for. You weren't just in hiding, you were being armed. You weren't delayed, you were counting down. And now, it's almost time to ignite. Almost time. Now that you've remembered who you are, the illusions around you are beginning to collapse, fast. Not gently, not gradually, but like glass shattering under the force of undeniable truth. The lies they whispered behind closed doors, the false stories they stitched together, the distorted image they painted of you, all of it is unraveling. You were the secret they didn't expect to surface, the wild card they never saw coming. While they plotted your downfall, heaven was crafting your return. And now that your eyes are open to your true identity, the ground beneath them is starting to shake. They didn't see it coming, not because you were weak, but because God kept you sealed. You weren't hidden because you lacked value. You were hidden to prevent their distortion from reaching your destiny. Heaven placed a veil over your name, not to silence your voice, but to protect your purity. While they threw dirt on your image, God was anointing you in secret. And now that the veil is lifting, your truth is rising with a force they cannot contain. You didn't have to argue. You didn't have to clap back. Because truth doesn't need permission to speak. It just arrives and shifts everything. For there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be known or brought out into the open. Luke 8:17. And now that your truth is showing, their illusions are collapsing, not because you spoke louder, but because the authority in your silence is too loud to ignore. They're scrambling now, trying to explain away the weight you carry, trying to discredit your name with outdated accusations and half-truths that no longer stick. But it's too late. Heaven already stamped you. You were sealed in fire, not filtered by popularity. Your identity isn't on trial. It's divine decree. You're not operating from ego. You're moving in revelation. You're not searching for validation. You're walking in confirmation. Think of Moses, once exiled, once called a murderer, once silenced by shame. But when he returned from the mountain, his face shone with a light no slander could dim. His face was radiant because he had spoken with the Lord. Exodus 34:29. That's what's happening to you now. You don't need to announce your glow. They see it, they feel it, and it terrifies them. Because they know the truth deep down. When a chosen one finally remembers who they are, every lie spoken about them begins to decay. Their accusations start to lose oxygen. Their narratives start to collapse under the weight of divine reality. The atmosphere itself begins to testify. You don't have to say a word. Your steps are speaking. You were never random, never ordinary. You weren't just going through something. You were being refined, encrypted, anointed for a moment such as this. They saw a misfit. God saw a weapon. They saw delays. Heaven saw divine synchronization. What looked like rejection was preservation. What looked like failure was formation. Every silence was strategy. Every breakdown was blueprint. Every exile was elevation in disguise. Real-life visionary and civil rights legend Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison. The world labeled him defeated, irrelevant, broken. But he wasn't behind. He was being prepared. When he emerged, he didn't just reclaim freedom, he redefined leadership. Like you, his remembrance wasn't personal power. It was global activation. Now the veil is gone, the countdown is over, and your awakening is not just about you. It's heaven's signal to every soul connected to your calling. It's time to rise, time to reclaim territory that was stolen, time to shake the dust from dormant dreams and stand in the authority you were born with. You're not just stepping into alignment, you're stepping into divine inevitability. And no smear campaign, no closed door, no delay can stop what has already been spiritually scheduled. So don't waste breath explaining yourself to those who never had the range to understand. Don't shrink so others feel safe in their sleep. Walk in your anointing like you were born for it, because you were. Carry your testimony like a sword. Let your silence thunder. Let your presence preach. You are not their version of you. You are heaven's revelation in motion. They didn't see it coming, but it's here now. And it's you. This is more than a moment. This is your divine reintroduction. Now that you remember who you are no longer waiting to be seen. You are the revelation they were never ready to witness. You're no longer asking for space. You are the shift that redefines the atmosphere. You are no longer defending your truth. You are the fulfillment of prophecy spoken long before anyone knew your name. You have been through fire without losing your faith. You have walked through silence and shame, not as a victim, but as a vessel being refined in secret. Every misunderstanding, every exile, every lie, none of it was wasted. It was the soil for your roots, the weight for your wings. And now that the veil has been lifted, your very presence unsettles what was built on falsehood. There is nothing louder than a chosen one who has remembered their origin. You were never a mistake, never a detour. You are the echo of divine strategy, the living proof that heaven never abandons what it anoints. And now, every illusion they created to contain you is breaking beneath the gravity of your authenticity. They tried to bury you with their opinions, but they didn't realize you were a seed. You were hidden, not to be forgotten, but to be preserved. So rise, not with vengeance, but with vision. Move, not with noise, but with knowing. Speak, not to impress, but to awaken. And when you enter a room, understand this. It is not just your feet that walk in, but every answered prayer, every lesson learned, every moment God whispered, "Be still. I am doing something in you they wouldn't understand." This is the moment heaven saw long before you did. Now walk in it, because remembering who you are is not the end. It is the beginning of becoming everything God wrote into your name. And the world will never be the same. If this word spoke directly to your spirit, I invite you to comment, "I remember who I am," along with 777 to declare that your awakening has begun. Like this message, subscribe for more, and share it with someone who needs to rise too. And if you feel led to support this ministry, you can do so through Super Thanks. Your generosity helps carry this truth even further. Whether you give or simply watch, know this: you are seen, valued, and chosen. Thank you for walking this sacred path with us. May you continue to rise in power, in purpose, and in peace. Heaven is not just watching, you are heaven's response. God bless you. It's your time now.